the opening and noticed the sunlight behind him reflected something. "Let's open this up," Bourne told them. Inside wasn't a skeleton as Bourne suspected, but a small pile of rotten clothes, jewelry and a helmet laid over top a buried urn. The others were the same, all seemingly common items made of bronze, some silver and the occasional gemstone. It was strange. Why would these be cursed? Marie wondered. Could be any reason, John said while he poked through another cache. The mountain clans are more superstitious than most. Val made a sound of surprise and reached into her own treasure trove. Everyone turned to see the spearwife hold up a tin case with a thistle engraving. She pulled off the lid and inside was a large bundle of wilted, crumbling herbs. Val took a quick sniff and frowned. "Juniper, I think." Bourne is the first to catch on, illness. He rechecked and found a similar case underneath the helmet. Juniper was a remedy for a number of illnesses, honey urine especially. If these were funeral cairns and every single one of the people buried here had carried juniper, then they must have been surrounded by the sick. Maybe the ones who buried them were worried the sickness had been carried by their bones and belongings too. Plague, Bourne concluded. John looked up terrified. "Are we in danger?" Val shook her head. "Not if Crag and Ghost are willing to be here. Whatever sickness took these people died with them. Also, whoever survived returned later," Bourne added. Myra raised her eyebrows. "How do you figure that?" Bourne gestured towards the barren hill peeking over the walls. "They came back and dismantled the hall. Probably used the wood and mortar to construct their new home." "What do you think, John? Is this the future seat of House Ghostok?" Marie asked. John scratched his chin in tandem with Ghost. "I'm not sure. It's a good candidate. I think those paths lead farther into the mountains. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some mineable rock there. I could probably negotiate a trade for lumber with the Night's Watch and work out a trade deal with the closest clans." He took a moment to take in the wide fields around them. "It's a straight shot to the King's Road and that means an easy route to the Umbers." Bourne smiled. There was John talking about his land without hesitation, without shame. The boy who had tagged along down into Wintertown. The boy who wanted more but was afraid to reach for it. The boy who would become the Lord of the Gift. Regardless of his dreamless sleep, Bourne felt a shiver in his soul. John's land, no matter where the man settled, was important. He frowned. Back on Skagos the two of them had talked over the fire about John's future. The times Val had convinced her husband to indulge in Skagosy ale, his cousin had talked about having a castle, being someone Eddard Stark could be proud of. They would make drunken speculations about where John would settle, who he would rule. For some reason Bourne had always felt that John didn't belong in the south, nor the east, nor the west. The White Wolf belonged in the north. As far north as he could go. Bourne shook his head, whipping the thoughts away as he listened to Marie give directions to the next Godswood. Their map showed a cluster of ruins on the coast of the Bay of Seals. They'd give Marie a few more days of dreaming and then head east. Time was passing and the cold was creeping into every breath. Chapter 41, A Dying Dusk. Chapter text. Salt and smoke, Marie whispered from her bed of roots, withered gardens and burning graves. She tried to rise from the ground, grasping at her legs when they refused to move. Someone was approaching. A man walked out of the darkness. He had a long face, no, a gaunt face, no, a fair face. He had grey eyes, purple eyes, green eyes. He frowned, he snarled, he sneered. He died, he died, he died. They all died. Marie shut her eyes. Marie opened her eyes. A creature stalked within the darkness. It was dead, it moved. It was dead, it screamed. It was dead, it killed. Marie shut her eyes. She was dead. Marie tried to open her eyes. She screamed. Forward slash 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 forward slash. It had been a normal night by all accounts. Once they reached the eastern coast of the Gift, a sudden storm moved in from the sea. They had followed Marie to a godswood and found a cave underneath a hill to wait out the weather. After several hours it became clear they would be stuck for the night. Marie tucked herself against the roots threading down the cave wall from above and began dreaming. The night passed peacefully. In the morning, Marie was still deep in her trance. Bourne tried every trick he knew to wake her, to no avail. At one point she'd gone into a fit, throwing her limbs and head violently. Val and John had to hold her down while Bourne tied her into a blanket made of their sleeping furs. Val's concentration was firmly on tending to the fire. The boom of thunder barely heard through the constant downpour of rain outside. Across the small cave they'd taken shelter in, Marie was twitching and rolling in the makeshift bed. Bourne had left briefly to gather some more firewood. John abruptly stood up. "Leave her be," Val said. Her husband sat back down, casting a sad glance at his cousin. Crag and Ghost were tucked close to her sides, offering what comfort they could. "There's nothing you can do," Val told him. John frowned. "Have you seen something like this before?" "Not in person," Val answered. "There are stories, of course. They say shepherds that speak with the old gods for too long never wake up. They become lost in a forest of spirits, leaving their bodies to turn into empty shells, food for the gods would. Sometimes you can find ancient masks embedded in the trunks of trees, when not even the bones of the dreamer remain." "There's nothing we can do?" John asked. "We just have to wait and pray." Val hummed. "Praying might not do much." Bourne returned shortly after and the rain began lightening up. With nothing to do and a need for fresh supplies, Val and John set out. "While we're out here, let's take a look at that keep," John suggested. Val wondered if he was avoiding the cave, where all that waited was helplessness. Unlike the western span of the Gift, there were more settlements and roads east of the King's Road. John guessed it was due to neighboring Skagos and the Bay of Seals being more hospitable than the Bay of Ice. Ghost had even tracked down quite a few herds of deer, cattle and more than one bear. They'd introduced themselves to the herders Leaf had mentioned and even discovered a duo of shepherds tending to an herb farm. That trip led them here, to the cliffs and beaches of the coast. Specifically, to the ruins the locals had named Hafroth, Bloodseer. "It certainly looks haunted," Val commented. Like most structures in the Gift, the walls of Bloodseer were rough, quarried stone. It was newer than the mountain stronghold they'd visited and larger. The walls formed a crooked triangle that touched the cliff face and came to a point at a high hill overlooking the western plains. Cut into the cliffside below was a set of sheltered paths and decayed gatehouses that reached down to the beach. The only standing structure was a crumbling tower and the broken skeleton of a harbor in the shallows below. The local shepherds said Hafroth was built by a Bolton when the Red Kings ruled the northeast. It became a stronghold for exiles and criminals after its builders died. The scoundrels had allowed pirates and slavers from Esso safe passage through the bay and earned the ire of both the Night's Watch and the Skagasi. No one was sure who finally conquered it, a Stark during a war with the Dread Fort, a Skagasi chieftain or a wilderling band. Either way, the tower fell and animals had been the fortress' only occupants since. John was drawn to the fallen tower. A strange whistling echoed from inside the broken stones. For a second it sounded like whispers, maybe the rumors of terrifying spirits were partially true. The top half had tumbled into the outer wall and crushed the main gate, leaving the doorway and bottom floor intact. Carefully, he ducked underneath a rotting beam. John looked inside and was surprised to find a huge hole in the floor not leading to the ground but to a staircase. Was there a tunnel beneath the tower? Taking in the rest of the stones, John guessed the tower would have been the centerpiece of the keep. If the original builder was a Bolton, a dungeon was not out of the realm of possibility. Looking around, John felt the same sensation as the abandoned hole in the mountains. Potential. From the harbor to the apparent dungeon and its positions as a waypoint between the Umbers, Skagos and Eastwatch by the sea. Upon his return to Winterfell, he'd have to begin discussing plans with Father. It was a monumental task to construct a new keep. His future home would by no means be as grand as Winterfell or the reconstructed Moat Cailin, but it would be his. A place to raise his children, to uphold the laws of the North. A place to belong. // Salt and smoke, Marie whispered from her bed of roots, withered gardens and burning graves. She started to rise from the ground, finding her body free from any constraints. She rose and rose and rose until she stood upon the clouds above the wall. "Come," a voice called out. Marie looked beyond the wall, to the depths of the haunted forest. The call came from a dark cave hidden beneath the trees. Not far from this cave, ice crawled closer and closer. A lone torch gave heat and light to the world. It was perched upon an ancient fortress covered in black flags. "Come," the voice repeated. Marie opened her eyes. Forward slash 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 forward slash. Bourne's heart had stopped when Marie's eyes flew open and she let out a scream. He'd dropped his plate and narrowly avoided tripping into the cookpot. His sister was confused, starving and exhausted. She swallowed some water and chewed on a handful of berries before passing out. Thankfully, he'd wiped his tears away when John and Val returned. It was a relief to all of them when Marie awoke again the next day. With her return to reality, came a fervent desire to leave. "The night fort," Marie insisted, "we must go to the night fort, and quickly." They had no reason to disbelieve her and it was impossible to ignore the urgency in Marie's voice. As they set out for the wall, traveling fast and light, Crag began behaving differently. He became restless, prowling back and forth at night and even snapping at Ghost. Their time in the gift had been enjoyable. Now the closer they ventured to the wall, the darker the night seemed, the dimmer the afternoon sun felt. It was Val who noticed the birds. Flocks of carrion passing over them at regular times just after they broke down their camp and during their suppers. They began spurning restful nights, rushing day after day to reach the horizon, which had been constantly growing and growing with a black band. The wall sent a chill down John's spine. He could make out the cracks in the ice and the rough shapes of the massive blocks. His last trip this close to the ancient structure had been brief and discomforting. There were still some nights, when John's dreams took a twisted turn and he felt hands clawing at his chest, opening wounds he didn't have. Ahead of them, nestled in the deep shadows of the early morning, the night fort hid. Its decayed walls and slouching stonework masked their approach. The morning fog froze the air and frosted their hair. Ghost kept close to John's heel while they crouched inside the night fort's postern gate. Bourne and Marie watched the battlements while Val guarded the rear. Val frowned and scanned around them. "Where's Crag?" she whispered. Bourne searched for the missing beast, but his movements were hasty and he stood just a little too high. An arrow flew from one of the castle doors. It struck an inch above Bourne's head, shattering against the gate. "Hold. Move no further," a voice yelled from the castle. John held a hand out behind to keep his companions still. The accent was familiar. Was it a trick of the echo? The night fort was unsettling, even with John's eyesight being better than average. Thanks to his connection to Ghost, the shadows only deepened when he tried to peer through them. He decided that negotiation may be worth a chance. After all, the arrow was aimed at the gate, not Bourne's throat. "Friend," John called back, "no one wants to die in a cursed castle. Let's come out into the open. There's no reason for strangers to fight." While he spoke, Val had drawn her own bow and Marie gripped her axe. John decided to take a risk. If anyone was going to put their life at risk, it should be him. "John, stop," Val hissed as he stood up and calmly walked forward. He stopped halfway through the courtyard. The door across the way clattered open, and of all people in Westeros, Benjen Stark emerged. "Uncle!" John exclaimed. "Nephew!" Benjen ran forward. Benjen yanked John into his arms. They hadn't seen each other since Sansa's name day feast 2 years ago. "By all the gods, John, what are you doing here?" Benjen asked. "Shepherd's business," John told him. Benjen raised an eyebrow, looking so much like John's father at that moment. "Shepherd's business," Benjen hummed. "Well, I'm here on watch business." John frowned. "I thought the watch had abandoned the night fort." Bourne and the others had relaxed and joined them under the cloudy sky. The sun hadn't properly risen, casting everything in a pale shade. "We have, but Lord Commander Mormont ordered me to inspect the castle for breaches. He's discontent with how quiet things have been." Benjen explained as he led them inside the castle proper. Val promptly tucked herself into the corner of the small hall, checking the shadows, like she expected more rangers to jump out at any moment. "Surely it's dangerous to do so alone?" Marie asked. Benjen stepped up to the fire pit inside the main chamber of the night fort. He pulled a pot lid out of the ashes to reveal a smoldering pile of kindling. "Normally, you'd be right," Benjen replied. "Except, the week before I left, my dreams became strange." The entire group shared a glance. "Did you see crows?" Val asked. Benjen looked up from the fire. Crows calling out from a snowstorm. One landed on a black tree as the sun was swallowed by the night sky. I recognized the courtyard where the tree stood. Here, at the night fort. The next morning, Mormont was acting peculiar and ordered 10 of us to secure the fortress. I ordered my escort to travel all the way to Eastwatch while I returned to Castle Black. "Yet, you're still here," Bourne noted. The first ranger of the Night's Watch sat down in a rotted chair. "I felt I was needed here. Mormont will understand." John took a deep breath. His uncle had his trust. "Things are moving in the far north," Uncle John began. "Mance Rayder has made peace with the Shepherds." Benjen scowled, shocked at the news. "What does that even mean?" "That the Shepherds will side against us." "It means, Mance will show you pathetic crows," Mercy Val growled. Benjen spun to face her. "You stand in the oldest home of the Night's Watch, and I will not tolerate disrespect here." Val wasn't cowed. She met Benjen face to face. "I've already shown this rotting shack my respect by not spitting on its floors." John, Bourne and Marie jumped between the two before fists could fly. "First Ranger!" Marie yelled. "Our father, the Great Shepherd, has not sided with the free folk against the North. He has taken the first step to brokering a peace. Not even the king beyond the wall can guarantee peace with his folk, and the Watch cannot afford to ignore the threat they pose." "Especially now," Benjen retorted. Uncle John pleaded. "Remember what we saw in Bran's crypt. Remember the responsibility we have. Mance Rayder is not coming south to conquer, he is running." Benjen paused and rubbed his face while taking a deep breath. "John, I haven't forgotten, but as First Ranger I have a duty to the men under my command." This time it was Marie who snapped. "You have a duty to your family, and a duty to the North, a duty to the world of men." They needed time to hash this out, John decided. Benjen could be instrumental in bringing the Night's Watch to a tentative peace with the free folk. A flutter of wings drew John's eyes to the door. A crow landed on the threshold. It pecked at the door 3 times. "Quiet," John commanded. They all looked to John, then to the crow. The bird knocked again. 3 times. "I'm starting to hate those things," Benjen said. Marie stepped forward. "Does it have 3? The bright tone of a horn struck them all silent. Benjen spun around. "A brother's horn, someone must have." The second horn blast had the first ranger running out, John and his companions in tow. The night fort stairs ran all the way up the wall. It was in horrible disrepair. There were entire chunks and steps missing, not to mention the lack of railing. Bourne shouted, "Let's try the gat." A third horn blast. It froze them in place. "Impossible," Benjen stated. Marie looked into the sky, where a crow was frantically circling. Inevitable. Her eyes bled white and her 3 eagles surged out of the trees in the courtyard, up and over the wall. "There's a man, in black, running for the wall," she reported. "Can you see what's chasing him?" John asked. Ghost and Crag had bolted forward and now circled John and Benjen impatiently, snarling and barking. Marie focused intently. "There's something in the forest, I can barely make it out. It's not free folk." John looked at his wolf, then the crow. He took a deep breath and felt the ice in the air chill his lungs. There was no doubt in his mind, this was no coincidence. "He won't survive on his own, there's no way to get through," Bourne said. "Black Gate." The crow caught from the battlements. It glided down onto John's shoulder. "Black Gate." From his shoulder, the crow went back into the castle welcome hall, through a side corridor and down a small stairwell by the kitchen. They all followed, like hungry children eager for a meal. "We are following a bird into the depths of an ancient fortress that has been abandoned for over 2 centuries," Benjen complained while squeezing around a corner. "That bird," Marie replied, "is currently a conduit for a greater power. It would not mislead us." "Then please enlighten me to what we are going to find here," Benjen replied. The dark corridors had twisted and turned, changing in stonework and material. They walked through the ages of the Night Fort, its centuries of destruction and rebuilding. Their path narrowed, the stone smoothed and warped into long sections of bedrock. Bourne had been present of mind enough to light a lantern on the way down. The oily shadows swallowed the illumination, giving just enough light to guide their feet. With the lantern held up high, Bourne peered at something in the distance. A flicker of light reflected back at him. The crow flew farther and farther. Bourne began to notice the light was not a torch, not a window, it was otherworldly, a beacon of thin silver. What kind of wall is that? Val wondered. It's not a wall, Marie answered, it's a face. The crow rested on the floor of a round chamber. Above, the ceiling led to a hole leading up into the castle. Across the floor, from floor to ceiling, a monstrously large piece of weirwood was fused into the side of the chamber. The carved face was minuscule in comparison. Scrunched and angry, it looked like an elder frowning at a youth's indiscretion. Another 3 horn blasts echoed through the chamber. The lone man was getting closer. Open! The crow cried, open! There were no handles, John observed. No indication this was a gate or door at all. Bloody bird, you're no help, Benjamin ranted, taking a kick at the frustrating animal. Uncle! John barked, focus on helping us get through this thing. Marie was up close with the wall, cautiously laying her hands on it. The bark remained motionless. It was a weirwood, Marie could sense the spiritual connections, but unlike the godswoods, the wood was inert, sleeping, and it did not want to wake up for her. John, come here, she said. Her distant cousin ran over. He was always willing to lend a helping hand. Thank the gods that Val was able to keep him reined in from his own naivety. Put your hand on the wall, Marie instructed. She had never told her cousin about the weirwood's unique reaction to him. In all her years on Skagos, she'd never seen a Hartree react to anyone but her father, the way they reacted to John. It wasn't obvious to human eyes, but any shepherd connected to the roots could feel when John touched a weirwood. The entire network just lit up, as if a bellows blew onto a fire. John's hand definitely woke the wall up, but not enough to make any physical changes. Skildva! The crow cried again, Skildva! Marie looked directly at Benjamin. The older man got the message and approached. Every step closer, the ephemeral light grew brighter. The horns blasted again, rapidly, in desperation. Benjamin felt a cloak of need fall over him. He could feel his brother in arms out there, running for his life, and this damn wall wasn't opening. Benjamin slammed his fist into the wall, staring the weirwood face down. In the name of the Night's Watch, I demand you open. Benjamin roared. The wooden face twitched. Keep going, Lord Benjamin, Marie urged. Benjamin growled. He stood back and drew his sword. In a clear voice, he recited his vow. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. The oath marked him separate from the people around him. It signified dedication to a greater purpose, one free of the trappings of avarice and politics. He made his vow almost 16 years ago. Every phrase still felt vibrant, still calmed the gnawing guilt in his soul. The mouth of the white wall opened, inch by inch, wider and wider. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch, for this night and all the nights to come. The more of this wooden gate was large enough to ride a horse through, perhaps 2 abreast. Every time he saw the true evidence of the North's magic, of his ancestors' work, it sent a chill down his spine. While the men and women watched the gate with hesitance, Crag and Ghost leapt forward without hesitation, charging down the newly revealed tunnel. A tense run took them straight through the magical passage. At the end was the rusted and ancient gate that the first builders of the wall had put in place, refurbished and repaired over the long millennia preceding the abandonment. It opened smoothly. Of all the possible threats Benjamin expected to confront as first ranger, he didn't expect the dead. No matter how strongly he felt the touch of the old gods, or the prophetic powers of green seers, nothing was solid or real about the threat of the others. Nothing except the corpses in front of him. A ranger was running on foot towards the wall, a flock of ravens flying above him. In close pursuit were 3 men on horseback. These horses were not hardy or fast, they were haggard, grey-skinned, with missing eyes and torn tongues. Benjamin noticed the riders wore rags and torn furs, Their hands were mangled and their skin peeled from their faces. "How do we fight such monsters?" Benjen asked. "Glass and Fireborn told him." Benjen looked at his young cousin. "We're out of both." "Then hack until they stay stillborn," declared. Benjen stepped forward to prepare for the charge. He heard the growl of Crag behind him and heard the wolf slam into something large, thrashing away in the hard snow. Benjen spun in time to dodge away from the claws of a shadow cat with half its skull missing. Crag wrestled the beast back to the ground. His wolf was larger and fiercer than a mauled cat. Benjen's moves felt effortless. He crouched lower, gripped his sword with two hands. In perfect unison, Crag pinned the shadow cat on its side and locked the front paws in his jaws. Benjen's sword fell and piece by piece he and Crag cut apart the abomination. When he turned back, the running ranger had already reached John and the others. His cloak and armor were ragged. Benjen would have even called the style old. It lacked the newer doublet that the watch had received in donation after the War of the Ninepenny Kings. In his hand was a heavy mace, dented and caked with rust. John, Bourne and Marie formed a makeshift line, spreading a wingspan apart. The stranger joined them in formation. "Take the horses at the legs, then take the hands and feet," the ranger instructed in a raspy, threadbare voice. The horses charged straight at them, their split hooves aimed directly at faces and chests. They all did their best to leap out of the way. "Ghost!" John called. The direwolf, nearly invisible among the snowfield, lunged out and ripped the horse's rotting hind leg clean off. Marie and Val waited for the horse to turn around and quickly knocked the dead rider to the ground while cutting the steed's front legs down. Bourne and the ranger held fast, and at the last second, the flock of ravens swarmed down upon the enemy. The birds clawed and tore bones and fingers from the man, who lost his grip and tipped sideways, pulling his mount off balance as well. They all desperately tried to dismember the men and animals. It felt unnatural, fighting a foe that moved without need for muscle or blood, that didn't react to pain. Benjen had killed his fair share of raiders, and even he was struggling to avoid the grasp of the dead men or the kicks of the horses. It was the ranger's mace that did the most damage. The stranger cleanly broke the bones and pulverized the joints. Meanwhile the pack of ravens pulled whatever remained apart and scattered them across the field. It all goes quiet from one instant to the next. The weapons go still, all that moves is the vapor from their labored breaths. Marie noticed that the stranger was still, no breath, no slouch. "Are you well, brother?" Benjen asked as he walked over to the stranger. "I am well, brother. Thank you for answering my call," he replied. The stranger wore a heavy cloak and had covered his face and hands in rags. He made a motion to the sky and the flock of ravens dispersed back towards the forest to the north. "We have little time. Gather your supplies, we must leave immediately," he called out. "Hold on," Val protested, "you're not going to even explain what just happened, who you are." He shook his head, the rags shifted around his eyes. "My identity has no bearing. I have been sent by the Three-Eyed Crow to find you all. As you can tell, our enemy was eager to stop me." Marie took a deep breath. "The Three-Eyed Crow must be freed from their sanctuary," she repeated. The words John was given by the children of the forest on Skagos. The stranger nodded. "Just so. There are whites and worse prowling the forests. The enemy moves. Even now, their cold gaze searches the trees." Bourne steps forward. "Who needs to go?" "All of you," the stranger tells them. "The path there is dangerous, but the path back will be deadly. Skytongue and Bullheart must reach the sanctuary alive, that I know for certain." Benjen cocks a brow. "Who are they?" "I was named Skytongue by my mother," Marie explains, "but I don't know who Bullheart is." The stranger looks to the west, listening in the silence. "We must leave." John instructed Bourne and Val to grab their supplies, while he and Marie fetched the horses. "Are we really going to trust this man?" Bourne asked his sister. His baby sister touched his shoulder. "We're trusting the old gods, brother." "I would rather we trust each other," Bourne replied. Marie fought down a smile. Her brother always had an honest heart. He had never truly shared his soul with the godswood, had never taken that step outside of himself. It was refreshing actually. "Then trust me and I'll trust you," Marie said. Across the courtyard, John was surprised to see Benjen saddling up as well. "Uncle!" John called out. Benjen smiled. Don't think you're getting rid of me that easily, nephew. I'm the first ranger of the Night's Watch, there will be no fighting White Walkers without me. Besides, Ned would never forgive me if something happened to you. John ran over and embraced his uncle. Thank you, for believing me, he whispered. Benjen held tight to his nephew, to Lyanna's son. I'm with you, John, wherever this leads. Quickly, they assembled beyond the wall, a small group in the grand expanse of the snow. They were due to make for the haunted forest, past the Antler River, to a cave hidden from the world, where a being of ancient wisdom watched and waited as dusk approached. Chapter 42, My Wandering Eye. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. John had only been beyond the wall once before. The quick jaunt up the coast that led him to a meeting with Mance Rayder. This trip was twice as important, and twice as dangerous. The stranger in rags, as they had been forced to call him, was an expert guide, leading them through the underbrush, past mud pits and around thorn traps. The haunted forest lived up to its name. Even Val felt an ominous presence in the darkened boughs and creeping ice. There's too much frost, Val muttered, the trail ponds shouldn't be frozen this far south. Stranger yelled back from the front, they've hidden winter beneath the ground, and now that the living have fled, it rears its head. John expected to encounter bands of wildlings. Maybe a fleeing group or a hunting party. He wasn't sure where Mance had encamped his army. Their only meeting was with the dead. A group of fresh whites hidden in the snow burst from the underbrush. Do we fight them? Benjen cried. Stranger shook his head, we don't have time. 2 hours of hard riding brought them into the heart of the forest. John recognized a feeling in the air, a tint to the sky. There was a heavy magic nearby. Suddenly, the trees melted away and they rode into a wide clearing surrounding a massive hill, atop which a Heartree stood proud and tall. The weirwood would put any tree he had seen on Skagos to shame. Make for the base of the tree, find the open knot, Stranger ordered while a flock of birds descended around him. Their horses were tied hastily to makeshift stakes and Bourne pushed aside a heavy curtain of roots, revealing a tunnel leading down, underneath the tree. Marie noticed Val standing up on the hill, gazing off. Val! Marie shouted. It's a storm, Val yelled down. Marie's eyes rolled back, she'd kept her birds close at hand, now they sat in the branches of the weirwood to keep watch. Her favorite, Ballast, snapped her wings and streaked upward. Ballast was gliding in the open air, the only calm spot that Marie could see for leagues around. This single clearing had been surrounded by dark rolling clouds. Sheets of snow and ice rained down, drawing closer and closer by the minute. This can't be natural, Marie whispered. We are almost out of time, Stranger said at her side. First Ranger, White Wolf, Free Woman, we must prepare to defend the tunnels. Marie followed everyone down into the opening, leaving her birds above. The tunnels were just tall enough for her and the others to stand, with Bourne having to hunch slightly. The stranger pulled bundles and chests from the dirt floor and began passing out torches, oil, linen and rusted hook spears made from bronze. When Bourne tried to grab a spear, the stranger stopped him. No, you and Skytongue must go deeper. The children await you, he said. Bourne glanced back at John, obviously confused. John just nodded and continued helping Benjen soak the torches. Reluctantly, Bourne followed Marie's lead down a side tunnel. The roots grew thicker and the sound of their companions grew fainter. He nearly bowled over Marie when she came to a stop. In front of her, crouching on the ground, was a child of the forest. It was the closest he'd come to the ancient beings. His father and Marie were the only ones he knew had actually conversed with them, on Skagos and in the Riverlands. Come, the creature said, and beckoned them farther in. Bourne quickly realized there were more children infesting the nooks and corners of the tunnel. They were led into a nexus chamber at the heart of the hill. The Heartree above them burrowed straight down, forming a central pillar. Nestled in it was a pale-skinned corpse, not unlike the ones John had described to him in the Godswood on the peak of Skagos. This body was infested by the roots, caught in a death grip. Littered across the floor were skulls and bones, animal and human. A dead greenseer. Bourne wondered. Not dead yet, the corpse said. // Are there any other supplies? Benjamin asked as he stared at the ragman, again wondering what he hid beneath his clothes. The stranger shook his head. That was all that could be gathered from the old caches. Will it be enough? The stranger sharpened the edge of another spear. It will have to be. We must hold the tunnels for as long as the children need. Benjamin sat down and picked up a spear, joining the effort. Ghost and Crag were sitting at the entrance tunnel, keeping a keen eye on the tree line. Benjamin could feel his skin prickle and his nerves stood on end, like he was on sentry duty himself. What is this crow? A being of power, the caretaker of this godswood, and an ally for the children still living north of the wall. The stranger answered. A shepherd, then? No. The shepherds are the link between the people and the old gods, the people and themselves. The crow was called here to fulfill another purpose. He was empowered to see further, to watch in the darkness. The stranger explained. To watch for the White Walkers, Benjamin concluded. The stranger laid down his spear and picked another. When he lived among men, he was said to have 1,000 eyes and one. Now, he believes there is nothing he cannot see. Forward slash 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 forward slash. Come closer, Brendan commanded. He was careful to keep his request soft but firm. The two young shepherds were wary, the tall one was afraid. Good. His vision darkened for a few moments and his body felt faint. The great other's fell hand was closing around his neck. Calling out to this group had been a risk, but the window to escape was small. Where was the bastard? The boy had plenty of dragon blood, it would make the assimilation simpler. The Valyrian magics Brendan favored would be easier to replicate on a kinsman. The children could not carry his mind and soul south, a mortal man was needed for the task. For nearly 2 years they had dawdled and waited, saying it was too soon to flee behind the wall. Finally, they could no longer deny his requests. Things were moving quickly and Brendan had grown frustrated with his caretakers. The eldest of their kind had obscured their movements on Skagos. He had no true grasp of their discussions with the shepherds, they preferred he spent his time watching the far north and tracking the movements of the White Walkers. They knew little of how far and wide he could truly see. Regardless of their dealings with the Green Seers, the island would be unsuitable to him. Too many curious souls in one place. Brendan planned to make his new home far from the wall. Bring me the White Wolf, he whispered. Skytongue and the brute looked confused. The stranger the woman referred to the dead ranger, told us we were to come speak with you. John stayed behind to prepare the defenses. His orders had been contradicted. Why? The children had been acting queer ever since the others had crossed the Frostfangs in force. More and more of the children fled south, overcoming their suspicion of men to find refuge in the Godswoods. Mance Raider's army was the last chance for any of the wildlings to escape the frozen hell their homeland was becoming. Any who stayed behind would die to the cold or the whites, that included himself. He swung his eye to the child sitting by his side. I need the White Wolf, he repeated. The child, wrapped in a robe of red leaves and black vine, was unbothered. The White Wolf has a different path before him, it said. Brendan resisted the urge to grind his teeth. The children had not spoken against his plan when it was proposed. They hadn't so much as blinked when he chose the White Wolf as a vessel. He looked back at the shepherds before him. He'd have to make do. Skytongue, he asked. The woman stepped closer. I am Skytongue. I am called the Three-Eyed Crow. In truth, I am a sentinel. I have given my body to the Weirwoods as a living sacrifice. It was my eye that watched for the return of the others. Now, the Great Other has come to kill me, but my vision will be needed in the years to come. It was an embellishment, boasting words to inspire the young woman. True, no other living Greenseer could see as deeply into the schemes and movements of the White Walkers as him. It was difficult for any dreamer to see past the magical protections of the wall, but for Brendan it was easy. Could the children recreate his abilities? Possibly. Brendan's reign as Hand of the King had been so effective due to his talent and dedication to sorcery. It would be difficult to find another with his depth of power in the current world. First Man blood ran thin outside the north, with the shepherds taking in anyone who showed talent. The Targaryens were gone from Westeros, apart from Jon Snow. Dabblers and wood witches were spread thin across the Seven Kingdoms. Brynden had watched and even guided more than a few, but none came close to the power he once wielded from King's Landing. "This body cannot be taken from here, Skytongue," Brynden said. "Thankfully, my powers and experience can live on, but someone must carry them. I would ask this of you, Marie Skytongue, daughter of Torrin Wolftongue, to take up the mantle of the Three-Eyed Crow. Take up the burden, for the great war to come." Brynden could see the moment the woman latched onto his words. The instilled need to matter, to give of herself for the greater good. A trio of children emerged from the roots above him, clambered down in haste. The enemy had arrived. Brynden cursed, it was happening too fast. He was running out of time. Forward slash 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 forward slash. Jon blew out a long breath, adjusted his grip on his sword and cleaved through a one-armed woman. Whites had swarmed out of the tree line and clogged the tunnel entrance. The stranger instructed them to work in pairs. Pin the dead to the wall or the ground and then set them aflame. It had worked the first 10 times, then a few had slipped through and they had retreated down the tunnels. Now their spears were gone and the fighting was close, brutal and dangerous. Val had taken a wound to her shoulder and Jon's thigh had a large gash. "How much longer do they need?" Benjen screamed, wrestling with a legless man while Crag and Ghost chewed apart another. The stranger looked up then reached out and pulled Jon and Val backwards. The whites surged forth just in time for a group of children to drop from the ceiling with a thick net of wicked thorns. It stretched taut and as the points stuck into the flesh and muscle of the whites. Like a school of fish, the whites slowly pushed and pushed but were caught in the trap. A child of the forest with honeydark skin ran up to them. "We are almost ready to depart this place." Jon dragged the remains of a skull off his blade. "What about Born and Marie?" "They are serving their purpose. Worry not, White Wolf, we will ensure their safety." The child motioned to their companion who brought over a large bundle of rotted canvas. "While the crow faces his fate, you must prepare to return south." The children led them further into the tunnels. Jon heard the cracking of wood and the sound of earth moving. The tunnels were collapsing. "Why were we brought here?" Jon asked. "For many reasons," the child responded. "You witnessed the new pact, but that is not all the old gods require of you." Jon was confused, in pain and starting to run short on patience. "Enough with your riddles," he shouted. The children looked up at him with a tense frown. They shoved the canvas bag towards him. He took it, unwrapping the top. The canvas fell away to reveal a rotted sword hilt. What were once undoubtedly fine adornments of silver and gold were now caked in dirt and rust. It had a rounded pommel and swooping, artisanal guards. His own sword was good castle-forged steel, straight from Winterfell's armory. It wouldn't hurt to have an extra blade on hand, just in case. As long as it still had an edge. Jon grabbed the hilt and drew the blade up. The sword moved through the air so quickly, Jon nearly cut Benjen's head clean off. "Careful, nephew," Benjen warned. Jon was silent, his attention focused on the miracle he held aloft. "Valyrian steel," Jon reverently whispered. The child had gifted him a treasure worth a house's fortune. How did such a rarity come here? Of all the places in the world to find Valyrian steel, a hollow at the end of the world seemed like a bad joke. He had no time to question the origin of the blade. The child in question had already disappeared and Jon was forced to quickly affix the sword to his waist. A Valyrian blade was a mystery to solve when they were safely out of danger. "Which way do we go?" Val asked, as she cinched a makeshift bandage. Ghost and Crag scented the ground, circling the room until they decided on a direction. The group followed their wolves around bends and through narrow openings. The farther they went, the closer to the surface they drew. Their torches began whipping and moving as the air grew fresher. At the very end of their path, Benjen cut through a thicket revealing trees and a stream. Jon clambered out of the tunnel. Looking back across the clearing, he saw the mass of undead surrounding the Weirwood Hill. "Our horses." Jon turned to Benjen, who stared in amazement at their steeds, hale and healthy tethered to a nearby log. "We have to wait for Born and Marie," Val stated. Benjamin crouched down with John and Val. "We need to stay hidden, we can't say how many of these whites are out here," he said. John heard a quiet creak from above. The children had reappeared and perched in the boughs around them. Hopefully, Bourne and Marie wouldn't be far behind. Forward slash 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 forward slash. "What must I do?" Marie asked the ancient man. "You know your history, all power comes with a cost," he responded. Marie swallowed. "Sacrifice. I am prepared to sacrifice." The three-eyed crow gestured to a basket resting on the floor in the corner of the room. Marie walked over and reached in. There was a bowl and a number of tools. Marie frowned as she drew them out. A thick knife, a small curved blade and a hook attached to a length of rope. She looked back at the man. "I don't understand," she said. "Blood is the greatest sacrifice one can make," the crow explained. Myra took a deep breath. "Should it be a limb?" Bourne jolted at her words. He was about to protest when the crow interrupted. "The sacrifice required must be greater, it must be lifeblood." "How can I carry your soul if I'm dead?" Marie asked. The crow simply turned his head to Bourne. The two siblings locked eyes. "I'll do it," Bourne told her, his voice low and calm. He stepped forward and began taking off his coat and cloak. Marie was struck silent watching him kneel before the crow, baring his chest. Skytongue, the crow said, "You must open the throat of your sacrifice, collect their blood, then mix in the weirwood sap and consume the paste." Marie ran her fingers along the bowl. "It's the same ritual as bonding with an animal," Marie noted, "that requires only some blood. Why do I need to take a life?" The crow shifted. "Your mind is strong, but to take in my knowledge and abilities, it must be forced open, beyond what you are able to achieve naturally. His life will fuel this transformation." Marie held the curved blade. It wasn't bronze but carefully chipped glass. The black oily surface hid any bloodstains, but Marie had no doubt it had seen its fair share. Marie stepped over to her brother, looked down at him. He'd always been taller than her. When they were young children, Bourne would let her ride on his shoulders through the meadows. Marie loved to go giant riding, and Bourne would make up tall tales about climbing great peaks and battling living storms. He would bring her inside and they'd curl up by the hearth together and sing until she fell asleep. "Why are you hesitating?" the crow asked. Marie gripped the knife again. Her hands were sweating. "Damn it, girl, you know the price. Now do it," he demanded. Marie, Bourne whispered as he lifted his head higher, "If this is your destiny, then it must be mine as well." How could she listen to that kind of talk, let alone accept it? "What will father say?" Marie said. Bourne frowned. "He'll say I died for a great cause, for you." Her hand shook. "What will John say?" Her brother cringed. "John knows that duty must come first." Marie lowered the knife. "You think this is your duty?" Bourne reached out and held her hands. "Maybe this is what I was always meant for. Why else would I be here?" He was serious. Marie couldn't believe it. Bourne actually thought this was his worth, to be a human sacrifice. Tears slid down her cheek. "How can you say that? Without hesitation. How can you look at all you've done in the last few years and throw it away?" Finally, she saw it. A slip of his resolute mask, a hint of fear in her brother's face. "You could have done the same things. You could have brought the direwolves south, guided John and made peace with the Starks. No doubt, you'd have done a better job of it," Bourne said. Marie struck him hard, a punch right to the face. Bourne fell back. She looked up to the scowling crow and dropped the knife. "Whatever power you offer, whatever fate the old gods have decreed, I won't sacrifice my brother," she declared. "It is the only way," the crow yelled. Marie was unmoved. She threw the knife away from her. "You," the crow called to Bourne, who lay still on the floor. "She is unwilling to take this power, this purpose into her own hands." "What of you?" Her brother could only shake his head. The crow whispered, "If neither of you will carry out the ritual, then I will have to make you." The crow's eyes shifted to solid white. Marie scanned the chamber, looking for what animal he was planning to skin change. No claw or talon came for her. Perhaps the animal was in another chamber. Marie crouched by Bourne, turned him over to check on him. In a split second, Bourne's large hand closed around her throat. He rose up, keeping a harsh grip on her, then slowly dragged her across the roots and skulls to the fallen knife. Bourne planted a boot in her back to keep her face down. Bourne! Marie gasped. Her brother turned his head down. His eyes had gone walk-white. Marie looked back to the crow. What have you done? To walk a man goes against every law and custom. Customs and laws will not stop the dead that walk, the crow told her. Now I have given you the chance to act with honor, you've refused. There is no more time for distractions. Bourne reached down and picked up the curved blade. Marie tried to shift his foot, to throw him off balance. Once your brother is gone, you will finish it, the crow declared. You would not want his death to be pointless, would you? Bourne smoothly put the blade to his neck, and paused. The three-eyed crow frowned and tilted his head. The blade touched Bourne's skin, then his hand drifted away. Bourne's arms were tensed, his shoulders hunched forward. Do not fight me, the crow said, accept your fate. Bourne stepped off of Marie as he staggered forward towards the crow. His teeth clenched and sweat poured down his face. With a loud scream, Bourne lunged forward and stabbed the knife into the crow's leg. Marie thought she heard a thunderous growl reverberate through the chamber. In a single instant, the three-eyed crow screeched, Bourne's eyes snapped back to color, and Marie grabbed him by the hand and dragged him backwards. The crow tore the knife out of his flesh and began to speak when the roof of the chamber shifted, cracked and fell in. On top of the rubble were wights. They crawled their way out of the rock and ground, pulling their broken bodies up the roots to grab, claw and bite into the three-eyed crow. Oh gods, Marie yelled. A dozen more corpses fell into the hole, the chamber was being overrun. Come on. Marie dragged a dazed Bourne through the tunnel behind her. She wasn't sure how she knew which way to follow, her instincts led her left, right and then left, until she burst out into a snow-filled ditch. As Marie and Bourne fought to catch their breath, they saw John, Val, Benjamin and the stranger riding towards them. Everyone was so exhausted they barely spoke. They were forced to double up on the horses, with Val and John sharing a horse to free a saddle for Bourne and Marie. They put distance between the Hartree Hill and themselves, making east for the coastline. On the shore of the shivering sea they allowed their horses to collapse in the sand. What happened to the crow? John asked. Bourne blinked hard. He walked into my body. Everyone was shocked. That's possible. Benjamin asked. Possible, dangerous, and taboo, the stranger explained. The roof caved in and the wights devoured him, Marie continued. The children disappeared at some point, I don't remember when. Val came up to examine Marie for any wounds. I thought that we were supposed to free the three-eyed crow. Wasn't that part of the pact Mance made on Skagos? The stranger stepped forward. The three-eyed crow has been freed. He turned back to the tree line and pointed. 3 children stood in the shadows, and slowly came to join them on the beach. You have done well, Skytongue, Bullheart. The lead child said. John recognized them as the gifter of the Valyrian sword. I don't understand, we've failed, the crow is dead surely. Marie protested. The child only blinked. A body that held the power of sight has perished, yes. The crow was never meant to be more than a watcher. The one we chose for the role exceeded his authority. He was useful, but we could not permit him to journey south. His interference would have jeopardized all we are working towards. What about his sight? His vision? Bourne asked. The powers of the crow were great, but he was not as unique as he believed. The child looked speculatively at Bourne. Bullheart was able to throw off his possession. Perhaps among the shepherds we will find strength we believed had vanished. What now? Marie wondered. The child turned south. The wall loomed on the horizon. Now the Skildva must retake the cursed fort, and make ready. The king in the north comes. Notes. N/. Thank you all for reading. It's been a while, but this chapter was very fun to finally get out. Bloodraven thought he could see everything, but the children have their own plans. Bourne definitely has more to him than meets the eye, and John now possesses a certain Valyrian sword. Next time we go back south, to see the aftermath of the War of the Stags. Stannis holds the throne and 4 of the 7 kingdoms. But how will he secure control of the Reach and the Westerlands? And what does Dawn have to say about all this? As always, C&C is appreciated. Chapter 43, Songs of Court. Chapter text. The Red Keep was aflame. The bricks were cool, the tapestries untouched and the corridors free of smoke, but everywhere Ned looked, everywhere he walked, he saw the burning stag. The castle was filled with the rush of servants, attendants and squires, all catering to the needs of the nobles King Stannis had summoned. After the second siege of King's Landing, the Seven Kingdoms seemed to collectively take their breath. Men had to be buried, supplies restocked, and with 4 kingdoms now acknowledging Stannis as Robert's rightful successor, allegiances needed to be solidified. "Arya, you cannot wear boots in the court," Catelyn patiently explained. The Stark family was gathered in a private wing. Catelyn, Arya, Bran and Rickon had joined Ned and Robb in the capital. It had taken all his willpower to keep back his tears of relief when he finally held his family in his arms. Arya and Rickon had grown so much since their journey south, Ned couldn't fathom what Sansa or Jon looked like now. Catelyn had brought servants from Riverrun to supplement their household staff. She'd gathered enough clothes and adornment to make them more than presentable for court. Catelyn also tracked down the belongings left during his hasty escape from the capital. Ned was wearing his finest ensemble. Soft grey linen pants, thick stockings and sealskin shoes. His undercoat was fine black silk, embroidered with wire-leaf designs. The heavy white velvet surcoat carried a bright silver direwolf badge over the heart, cinched tight by a belt of heavy silver links. Finishing his outfit was a black wool cloak trimmed by wolf pelt and treated with the finest oils Winterfell could procure. He selected a few of the more extravagant rings House Stark kept carefully preserved, set with sapphires and diamonds. Though he did choose an older iron ring, a single black obsidian stone in the center. It had belonged to his Flint ancestors, and passed down to his father. Catelyn had ordered a new gown before they departed the north. It was light enough for the southern heat but included uniquely northern features. The main cloth was a dark grey while her sleeves were stripes of black and white. The collar and hems had meticulous bronze embroideries that matched the heavy round pendant she wore. Attached at her waist, she added a bearskin wrap that Lady Mormont sent as a gift. Her hair was pulled into traditional northern braids but sparkled with delicate crystals Ned had chosen as a wedding gift, so many years ago. In Ned's humble opinion, she was the most gorgeous woman in the city. Robb as the Stark heir wore an outfit very similar to Ned, similar colors, a leather belt with a single bronze clasp bearing the direwolf, and a white wool cloak. Bran, Arya and Rickon wore well-made clothes of various grey tones with deep black accents. Arya had retained her Bear Island aesthetic with some minor concessions to courtly manners. Bran had taken a liking to his squire's clothes, which included a sturdier surcoat decorated with wolves and waves along the back. "When can we go see the wolves?" Bran asked his father. Ned smiled at his son. "Before dinner we'll go to the Godswoods and check on them." While the Red Keep's steward had been hesitant, Ned made it clear the direwolves would be kept close at hand while his family resided in the castle. The kennels were too small to fit the whole pack, but the Godswoods were large enough to serve as a refuge. Stark guards remained at the entrances to ensure no random passerby entered without warning, and had orders to watch for any zealots at the same time. Donal Locke entered the chamber. "Lord Stark, the king has opened the throne room." Ned sent the Locke heir to gather the other northern lords. He corralled his family into order and began leading them to the Iron Throne. There were dozens and dozens of nobles filing into the Grand Room. It had taken weeks for the principal lords of the Stormlands, Vale, and Riverlands to arrive in King's Landing. Ned stood confidently near the front of the audience. Lord Umber, Lady Mormont, Harry on Karstark, Domeric Bolton, and Lord Sewin stood behind him. Representatives for many other of his vassals mingled nearby. Arrayed around the chamber, the other kingdoms assembled quickly. Yohn Royce stood proudly at the head of the Vale contingent, speaking with a younger blonde man wearing the red and white diamonds of House Hardyng. "That must be young Harold, Jon Arryn's heir." The Stormlands had no definite leader. Many of the Marcher Lords knew they had fallen out of favor with the king due to their allegiance to Renly. It appeared the elderly Lord Estermont was attempting to take charge. Lord Tarth, Grandison and Morrigan were deep in conversation with him. The Blackfish arrived last, confidently taking his place with the River Lords. Catelyn had been speaking with her uncle for hours every day. After Hoster and Edmure's funerals, Brynden had taken up the househead title and put the Riverlands to order. His reputation preceded him, and Rob's victory against the Lannisters emboldened the men. The Westerland border had been reinforced to keep a careful watch for the old lion's next move. Many assumed it would come from the Golden Tooth. Brynden wanted to avoid being surprised. Ned heard the clamour of pages enter from a side chamber, led by the royal steward. "All rise for their graces," the steward called out. Everyone swiftly rose from their seats. Conversation stopped. The entire crowd focused on the great throne. "Make way for King Stannis Baratheon, first of his name, King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm, Lightbringer." Stannis entered, his grim face already set in place. He wore a more ornate version of his usual attire. Rubies and garnets had been added to embellish the flame designs, and a fresh stag skin had been prepared for his cloak. Queen Sliss was similarly dressed in bright colors, her crown similarly bore the flame motif, and around her throat was a large ruby choker. Princess Shireen wore a dress fit for a royal. The yellow of House Baratheon covered her from head to toe, and a veil covered the scarred part of her face. Remain standing for Queen Sliss Baratheon, Crown Princess Shireen Baratheon, Maester Olmon and Lady Melisandre. Maester Pycelle remained under arrest under suspicion of breaking his oaths and conspiring with the Lannisters. Stannis had appointed a maester he knew from the Stormlands to fill the Grand Maester's duties until another was elected by the conclave. Lady Melisandre's presence was a given. Every meeting with the new king included the Red Woman. She was always there, sometimes silent, sometimes commanding the conversation. Even now she surveyed the room from a chair below the throne, picking out people with an eagle's gaze. "Lords and ladies of Westeros," Stannis began, "today many things shall be set in motion. Rewards, punishments, and decrees. Know this, though we have been victorious, I will not rest until the entire realm is brought back under the rule of the Baratheon dynasty and all pretenders are quashed. I will build this kingdom into one whole, as is my right and as is my duty." It was no great speech, and many were unsure if they were to applaud or bow. Stannis continued, unbothered by the silent response of his subjects, "My first act as king shall be to appoint those lords who shall serve upon my small council." The steward stepped forward, list in hand. Ned already knew most of the appointees. Stannis had offered him the position as Master of Laws. He declined. Ned desired to stay in the south as little as possible. A year was already too long. That was not to say Ned missed the chance to influence the selection process. "Lord Yohn Royce of Runestone," the steward called. Bronze Yohn stepped forward. "Will you accept the duties as Hand of the King? To serve, advise, and lead in the name of King Stannis?" the steward asked. Lord Royce answered clearly and loudly, "For the honor of Runestone and the honor of the Vale, I will accept." A page ran forward and presented Lord Royce with the symbol of his office, the chain of hands which he proudly put around his neck. A great cheer arose, as the Valyman saw one of their own once again ascend to the highest office in the realm. Sir Willis Marndaly of White Harbour. Sir Willis stepped forward, already prepared for this. "Will you accept the duties as Master of Coin? To serve as the treasurer and keep safe the kingdom's riches in the name of King Stannis?" Willis gave a gracious bow. "As the king calls upon me, so do I answer. I will accept." The northern contingent roared in approval. Many thought it right that the money-minded Marndalis be sent to King's Landing. With their connections to the crown, wealth could flow up through White Harbour to the rest of the north. Lord Jason Mallister of Seaguard. Lord Mallister looked to the Blackfish as he took a small step out of the crowd. Brynden simply nodded and moved him forward. Another choice Ned had advised against. Brynden needed to focus his energy and attention on domestic matters. He had no time to be dealing with the politics of the capital. His former squire, a well-known knight and lord in his own right, was a respectful alternative. "Will you accept the duties as Master of Laws? To serve as the king's own hand and ensure truth and justice are given to the kingdom's people in the name of King Stannis?" Lord Jason drew his sword and laid it down as he knelt. "In the name of the Father and the Warrior, I shall uphold the laws and customs of Westeros, in the name of King Stannis." The entire audience applauded. Lord Jason was well regarded across the kingdoms for his skill at tourneys and his actions during both rebellions. He would be a valuable ally to Brynden. Lord Montford Valerian of Driftmark. The Valerius may seem an odd choice to be favoured, but their naval power was crucial to Stannis' hold on the narrow sea, and they had declared for him from the beginning. He was classically dressed in Valyrian green with long hair. "Will you accept the duties as master of ships? To serve as the king's captain, guide his ships and protect his seas, in the name of King Stannis." Lord Montfort gave a formal bow. "As I did so many moons ago, I swear my allegiance and abilities to you, your grace. I accept." The Crown lands certainly showed their appreciation. The Valerians had historically been one of their strongest representatives until the rebellion had thrown their Targaryen ties in disfavor. It seemed their fortunes were once again changing. Finally the steward said, "King Stannis has decreed the creation of 2 new titles that will join the small council. His Grace formalizes that the office of advisor to the king shall hold a special place of counsel and shall aid the hand of the king in the execution of his duties. Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell has agreed to continue serving as an advisor to the king, as he did the late King Robert." Ned had made the concession to display his support and solidarity with Stannis. A negotiation made to guarantee the Master of Coin position, and to ensure Ned could act with authority in the south for the foreseeable future. The second position, Mistress of Fire, has been created for Lady Melisandre, so that she may continue to guide the king in matters of faith. That announcement was met with whispers. The peculiarity of the title, the undercurrents of the Red Faith, and the formalization of Lady Melisandre's authority sat ill with most of the audience. Casting his eyes up to the gallery, Ned noticed the crowd of knights and ladies clapping politely, with their red cloaks proudly on display. The converts to Orla had only grown since the departure from Storm's End. Stannis' victory had seen a swell of recruitment, especially among the younger warriors who were knighted after the siege. They had the favor of the Queen and a few key lords. On to the next matter, Stannis said, drawing control of the proceedings back. "It is time for my Kingsguard to take their rightful place." 7 squires emerged bearing pristine white cloaks. They lined up in front of the throne in a semicircle. Stannis stood and stepped down from the throne as they arranged themselves. "I summon forth these knights who have proven themselves to me, with word and deed." Stannis held his hand forward. The steward read off the list of names. Many were familiar to Ned. They were men who had earned their fame during the rebellions, a few had distinguished themselves during the siege. He'd listened to Stannis debate the various appointees with his council. What merited a white cloak was very different from a sworn sword. A northern lord would look for a mix of loyalty and ability, dosed with a healthy mix of personality. After all, in the north a sworn sword needed to have the right temperament to fit his charge. The Kingsguard were murkier. The men who took up the oaths of the White Tower came from political appointments, personal preferences, no doubt a healthy share of bribes. Robert's Kingsguard had been filled with lethal lapdogs, men who Ned would not trust to guard his family but who cut down any they were ordered to. Cruel men, most of whom were dead. Richard Hawke, the Knight of Moths, Stannis' men called him. Sir Richard saved the king's life during his attack on the Mudgate, nearly losing an eye for his effort. Roland Storm, the bastard of Night Song, sworn to House Caron. One of the men Davos Seaworth considered loyal to the core. He led the charge against the Red Keep and raised the king's banner above Maegor's Holdfast. Guyard Morrigan, a controversial choice for Stannis. Guyard had been an ardent Renly supporter, a member of the so-called Rainbow Guard. Some protested his appointment, but Guyard had a well-earned reputation. He even led Stannis' vanguard during the siege, taking a number of prisoners. Lyn Corbray Sorrow, the foot soldiers named him. An experienced but hot-tempered warrior with a Valyrian steel sword at his waist. His blade had cut through swathes of gold cloaks during the siege. He slew 2 of Joffrey's Kingsguard in the fighting, Sir Blount and Sir Moore. Thoros of Myr, a choice made by Lady Melisandre. A fully ordained red priest standing guard at the king's side. You couldn't hope for a stronger message to the Red Faith. The Thoros who fought at the breach in the Greyjoy Rebellion had fallen into a drunkard who had joined Robert in his sport and revelry. Ned was unsure why Thoros had accepted the cloak, but he looked more sure-footed than Ned remembered. The men stepped forward and donned their cloaks. As one, they kneeled to the king and took their oaths. Stannis took his seat. As you can see, there are only 5 knights who stand. I have reserved the position of Lord Commander for Sir Barristan Selmy, until such a time as his death or his refusal can be confirmed. The position shall remain vacant. There is however another cloak ready for its bearer. In the weeks ahead, I hope to find a knight worthy of it. The newly anointed Kingsguard took up positions upon the dais and at the royal family's side. Thoros of Myr took a stand behind Lady Melisandre. Now those matters are settled, we must turn to my kingdom. Stannis ordered. With the death of Lord Hoster Tully and his heir, Edmure Tully, a new Lord Paramount of the Trident must be appointed. Lord Brynden Tully, step forward. Brynden came to the center of the chamber. As the head of House Tully and Lord of Riverrun, I charge you with the rule of the Riverlands as the Paramount of the Trident. You will hold these lands in the name of the Iron Throne, you will command your vassals to defend it, and you will ensure its people pay proper homage to your king. Stannis recited the old oath. I swear on the name of Tully, the stones of Riverrun, and the waters of the Trident, that I shall hold the lands under my charge in good faith. Brynden replied, the same words that Edmund Tully had said before Aegon the Conqueror. Now came the more tenuous announcement. Your Grace, Brynden began, I ask that you bear witness to my selection of a new heir. As I have no sons, no daughters, and no wife. Whispers erupted. With no remaining sons, the Tullys needed to select someone from outside the main line to continue their family, leaving only cousins for consideration. Brynden had refused the idea of marrying. House Tully needed an order of succession now. Stannis nodded. Brynden bowed and pulled forth a sealed document, copies of which had already been given to the king and to other close allies of the Tullys. I, Lord Brynden Tully, name as the heir to House Tully and the lordship of our holdings, my squire and grandnephew, Brandon Stark of Winterfell. Ned laid a hand on his son's shoulder and the two walked to Brynden's side. The eyes of the court now laid upon his boy's back. Another long conversation led to this moment. Of Brynden's living descendants, there was only Robb, Bran and Rickon. Robb was obviously already committed to the lordship of Winterfell and Rickon was too young to begin learning his duties. Catelyn and her uncle worried that Brynden may pass on before Rickon even reached 6 and 10. In the Riverlands, a child lord was a dangerous position to hold. Bran was already a squire, had a passing knowledge of southern customs, and was familiar with the faith of the Seven. His squireship with the Blackfish and Robb's newfound fame with the Riverlords would lay the groundwork for his rule. Brandon Stark, Stannis addressed, the crown finds your heirship acceptable, owing to ties of blood and loyalty. Bran swallowed and bowed, just as he was taught. Thank you, your grace, I shall do my best to be worthy of this station, the boy said. I also wish to make it known that upon the passing of my great-uncle, I will also take up the Tully name, to honor my grandfather Hoster, and my uncle Ed Muir. A well-spoken speech that elicited praise from most of the room. The Riverlords would now begin their plays for Bran's favor, and no doubt his choice of wife. Adopting the Tully name had been Bran's idea. The boy took the loss of Hoster and Ed Muir hard. He'd bonded with them both during his stay and had voiced his concern that becoming House Stark of Riverrun felt disrespectful. Robb had argued it would help secure his title, being so visibly tied to the north. Bran had actually countered that could become a detriment to his own children, and give strength to any potential challengers in the future. A keen insight from a boy so young, Ned was very proud at how well Bran had taken to his lessons. The three of them retreated from the spotlight, allowing Stannis to bring the next matter forth. With the deaths of Lord Jon Arryn and his heir Robert Arryn at the hands of the Lannisters, a new Warden of the East must be named. Step forward, Sir Harold Hardang of Iron Oaks. Harold swaggered forward with a smile on his face. Ned swore he could hear the maidens swoon. Sir Hardang, Neil the King was in no mood for pageantry. I charge you with the rule of the Vale as the Warden of the East. You will hold these lands in the name of the Iron Throne, you will command your vassals to defend it, and you will ensure its people pay proper homage to your king. Harold looked up at the throne. I swear to defend the mountains, the Vale and the Fingers in the name of the Iron Throne, with all my strength and valor, and by the grace of the Seven who are one. May my word be as high as honor. Harold declared. Stannis continued to frown. He appeared unimpressed with the young man before him. Then rise as Lord Harold Arryn, Lord of the Eyrie and Warden of the East, Stannis pronounced. Harold rose to the cheers of his countrymen. He motioned to the crowd and a servant came forward with a blue cloak. Harold donned it, proudly carrying the eagle of House Arryn upon his back. Your Grace, Harold called out, with your blessings, I would announce before this court of great lords and ladies, my betrothal to Lady Zilla Royce. Another round of applause and congratulations. The new Lord Arryn certainly enjoyed the attention of others. Ned would have to go and give Jon his congratulations. It seemed the Royces would once again have their blood upon the Arryn seat. Harold himself had little in the way of wealth or renown, the Royces would be his main supporters. Would the Arryns of Gulltown take this shift lying down? Jon had never spoken of his merchant cousins, but no doubt they would feel doubly wronged for being passed by in succession. Enough! Stannis shouted. The crowds quieted and Harold quickly retreated. The king continued, "My final act today is to set the Stormlands to rights. As the Crown Princess and my heir, Lady Shireen shall take up the mantle of Lady Paramount of the Stormlands and Lady of Storm's End until her marriage. Until that time, when she and her husband take up their full duties, my kinsman, Lord Guston Estermont shall act as steward of the Stormlands and Castellan of Storm's End." The king abruptly stood. "I declare this court adjourned." Stannis swiftly led his household out of the throne room, the king's guard and small council in tow. Confused by the sudden departure, the crowd took a few minutes to orient themselves and began to leave, heading for tea rooms and chambers, ready to gossip and send messages home. Forward slash 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 forward slash. "I miss Winterfell," Catelyn commented. "As do I," Ned told her. It was mid-afternoon, a few days after the king's first announcements. Busy as his grace was, Ned was unsurprised to awaken to a summons at his door for himself and Catelyn. There were still conversations yet to be had. Stannis made it clear he would not let the North easily return to its blissful isolation. Not that the Starks were looking to return either. Ned and Catelyn were led through the many chambers of the king's wing to a large study that Stannis had taken over. It was apparently one of King Jaehaerys' old rooms. Shelves had been moved in and filled with books, ledgers and piles of paper. Tables were covered with parchment and ink, with a small group of scribes moving in and out, writing and copying. "Lord Mallister," Catelyn greeted. Jason Mallister looked up and smiled. The new Master of Laws was standing over a page's shoulder. "Lord and Lady Stark," he said with a firm shake and a kiss of the hand, "wonderful to see you." "We didn't mean to interrupt your duties," Catelyn apologized. Jason shook his head. "No apologies necessary, my lady. A small break is warranted, I think." "I doubt I've ever seen this much paper in one room since I came to King's Landing," Ned commented. "I can imagine. Normally these would be confined to the lower floors, but King Stannis insisted he wanted to oversee their work," Jason explained. "The king ensures his record keepers are busy," Catelyn noticed. Jason swept his hand around the chamber. "As Master of Laws, I have been charged with preparing a review of the current royal records and agreements. The Master of Coin and Maester Olman have been given similar tasks." Ned frowned. "The king is worrying over records at a time like this." Jason chuckled. "The king and his hand haven't looked at a single page written in this room," he revealed. "They are focused on the West, and his grace's enemies." They made small talk with the Lord of Seaguard until another aide found them. They walked through more rooms until they entered the king's solar. Stannis was seated at a large desk, Jon Royce beside him with Lady Melisandre and Davos Seaworth in opposite corners. "Lord Stark," Stannis greeted. "Your Grace," Ned and Catelyn bowed. "Take a seat, Ned, we've much to discuss," Jon told them. There were maps and tokens set out before the king, maps of the Crown lands and Riverlands marked with stags, wolves and trout. The Reach and Westerlands lay opposite, with lions and roses spread about. "Are your men ready to march?" Stannis pointedly asked. Ned nodded. "Yes, my cavalry have been reinforced and the footman equipment replenished. My injured have been sent back via ship and I've ordered the garrison at Deepwood Motte doubled. Reserves are beginning to gather at the Neck and will march south to Riverrun on my order." Jon nodded and turned to the king. "With fresh northern troops, the Vale and the Riverlands can combine to strike at the Lannisters." Catelyn spoke up. "Has news arrived from Casterly Rock?" Jon picked up a bundle of letters, reports and rumors, "Not nearly as many as we'd like. Lord Varys has yet to reappear and only a small portion of his network is known to us. We've Sir Davos to thank for most of this news. His connections among the sailors and docks has proven very valuable." Sir Davos simply inclined his head, a stoic frown on his face. An official declaration arrived this morning, Stannis revealed, handing over a thick parchment to Ned. In the name of King Joffrey Baratheon, Ned read through the typical titles and exaltation. The true king of the Seven Kingdoms, I denounce the actions of my traitorous uncle, the false King Stannis, Eddard Stark, Hoster Tully, and the Lords of the Vale. These traitors have left the light of the Seven and would drag the good people of Westeros into heathen worship of the Red God of Essos or the Tree Gods of the North. Any true and pious lord in this land may seek clemency, mercy and reward by returning to the fold of their true king. Ned flipped the page over, and it goes on and on. No doubt every keep from Lannisport to Maidenpool has received a copy, Catelyn noted. The Lannisters have certainly made their case to the faithful. As if Tywin Lannister ever stood in a September and made a sincere prayer. Joffrey is many things, and holy is none of them, Stannis derided. When did he arrive at the Rock? Catelyn asked. Our best guess is 2 weeks after the siege, Jon said. A sail docked in Lannisport about that time and was met by Lord Tywin and a full company of red cloaks. Joffrey, Lady Cersei and Baelish were seen debarking. No sign of Lysa or the younger brother, Tommen. Ned wondered. Jon shook his head, none. We've asked the imp, but he insists the boy was with his family during the siege. Catelyn leaned forward. What is to be done with Lord Tyrion? With him and the Kingslayer as hostages, surely we have some leverage over Lord Tywin. Ned placed the declaration down. The crux of the matter is Joffrey's claim to the throne. I'm not confident that Lord Tywin would sacrifice his grandson's crown for anything. Stannis leaned on the table. If he will not submit, then his sons shall pay the price. Jon glanced at Ned. It may be useful to have the potential heirs of Casterly Rock under our power. No matter how this war ends, Tywin cannot be allowed to remain as lord. Catelyn glanced down. The Kingslayer will never ride or fight again. Grey Wind shredded his legs to ribbons. He barely survived the surgeries that saved his life. Would the Westerlands accept the imp? Jon proposed. Stannis lifted a finger. If I allow the Lannisters to remain Lord Paramounts, I have a strong desire to choose another. That drew looks from everyone. The Lords Paramount and the Wardens had remained unchanged since the conquest. It was clear to Ned that the unseating of a Paramount would require not only overwhelming support for the crown, but also the house in question needed to be in no position to resist. Honestly, if the rebellion had failed and the Mad King still ruled, Tully, Stark, Arryn and Baratheon would be empty names now. Who would replace them? Jon asked. Stannis ran his fingers across the maps. There are many who would prove more loyal among their bannermen. He stopped his fingertip on Highgarden. If only I could do the same to the Tyrells. The king sat back with a sigh. That is a matter for the small council. It's not why I summoned you both. Your youngest daughter, Arya, would be a suitable companion for Princess Shireen. Catelyn bit back her first reaction, waiting for Ned to respond. Our daughter would be more than happy to attend the princess. I would caution that she is a northern lady. There is much about a southern court, especially a royal court, that she may be unused to, Ned explained. The king looked over to Sir Davos and back. Those things can be learned. The lords of the realm must see your family and mine side by side, and Shireen must begin developing her ties to the great houses. Can we assume that a guard and sworn shields would be permitted? Catelyn asked. Jon nodded. Of course, she would not be the only noble lady around the princess. Arya is betrothed to the heir to Deepwood Motte, but it will be many years before they marry. I would only ask that Arya be able to visit her betrothed and Winterfell every few years, Ned said. Jon looked to the king. Stannis gave a simple nod. Until this war is over, Lord Stark, you shall attend my councils. Soon, we will march again. // Chapter 44, Songs of Honor. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Arya never got tired of seeing armies gather. The ranks upon ranks of banners and spears, dancing between each other while the horses paraded down the ranks. She leant over the railing as a grand company of men marched out of the Red Keep. Where do you think they're going? Someone asked. She looked back at the cluster of girls milling about the balcony. There were a mix of older and younger ladies from the Vale, Stormlands and the Crownlands. Arya was the only northern girl, and the only girl with Riverland blood. They are headed for Cider Hall, Arya answered. All the girls turned to her. She'd feared that these new companions would be like the old Sansa, chittering and insulting. At worst the more devout girls were wary of her. Thankfully, Princess Shireen seemed to like her, so did Thulsa Redfort and Sarah Mertins. How do you know that, Lady Arya? One of the Crown Lands girls asked, something chittering. House Fossway has declared for King Stannis, so did House Footley, House Ashford and House Meadows. My brother says that Bitterbridge and Longtable must be taken to ensure the king can march on Highgarden. The armies are going to meet at Cider Hall first, she explained. Princess Shireen leaned forward. My great-uncle, Lord Alistair, has called the banners of Brightwater Keep, and many other lords of the Red Lake have joined him. The king is moving to support them. The princess typically sat in a comfortable chair under an awning. Her hair was meticulously cared for. Arya knew the royal maids wore gloves while caring for her, and that her long black locks covered the scars on her cheek and neck. It wasn't pleasant to look at. Grayscale killed nearly everyone it touched. She wondered if Shireen was blessed or cursed by the gods with survival. Shireen was terribly shy at the best of times. The king and queen treated her like a valuable doll that needed to be kept untouched in a box. It had taken a long time for her to even feel comfortable joining the other girls in any activity. Arya knew it was hard to be alone. To be looked at by the people you wanted more than anything to like you, and have them turn you away. Her father had taken her aside the day before she officially joined the princess group. Arya, he said, the princess is in a very delicate position. What she needs now is a friend, as much as a handmaiden. Her parents trusted Arya to represent House Stark, and everything she did was being watched. The guards, the maids, the king and queen. From the moment she left her chambers in the morning until she went to bed, she had to be careful about every word she said. It wasn't easy. Arya knew there had already been some fumbles. What Jon called her wit and cunning also happened to annoy self-important lords and ladies. The other girls had started talking about their favorite flower arrangements. Arya threw in a comment or two about northern roses from the Wolfswood or the witch hazel from Deepwood Motte. None of the other girls really knew what they looked like, so Arya decided to show them. Princess, she asked, do you know if there's books on flowers in the library? Shireen perked up and hesitantly smiled. I believe so, we can go check. More than a few of the girls begged off due to previous engagements with their family. Leaving Shireen to lead Arya, Thulsa, and Sarah to the royal library. It was certainly larger than Winterfell's. Some of these books are very old, Thulsa noticed. The princess navigated the stacks and shelves with ease. She'd barely been at it 5 minutes and already there was a stack of beautiful illustrated books on flowers and herbs from across the 7 kingdoms. Arya wandered over. Oh wow, that's ancient Andal. Shireen joined them. How do you know that, Lady Stark? You can call me Arya, Princess. She pulled chairs out for everyone. Old Andal has a lot in common with the languages of the Free Cities. That word there, she pointed to the chapter title on the page in front of them, still means one in Essos. Can you read any Valyrian? Shireen asked. Arya looked over. Not really. My father isn't a huge fan of Valyria. The library was quiet. Shireen peeked over from behind her hair. I'm very sorry about what the Mad King did to your family. My father always said it was a barbaric injustice. Arya smiled. Thank you, Princess. My father doesn't like to talk about it. I actually don't know much about my grandfather or my uncle. The princess leaned close. I know nothing about my own grandparents. All father ever said was they went down in a storm. I tried asking Uncle Robert, but he wouldn't share anything either. Arya and the princess settled into a nice conversation over the book table. The hours floated by one after another. That was the typical routine for Arya. She spent her days with the princess, and evenings with her family, or at least, father and Robb. Mother, Bran and Rickon had departed with Uncle Brynden back to Riverrun. Hopefully, they would all get to return to Winterfell and see Sansa soon. Arya could only guess how much her sister missed everyone. Arya wanted to see Jon so badly, but father said that her new obligation was vital to their house. Jon would want her to do her duty. She settled into her chair and began telling Shireen about Bear Island. The princess was always eager for new stories. // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // // ////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// boy, finally time to take it off for good," he said. The direwolves were all back in healthy shape. Greywind and Moore had their own collections of small wounds from battle. "Alice is going to be wroth with me when she sees these nicks," he muttered. Thoughts of his betrothed provided a pleasant distraction as he arranged matters for the day. The northern army was being readied for the march, and his father was preoccupied with attending the king. Their camp was in front of the city walls. King Stannis had allotted the ground by the King's Gate for their use. It was a place for the men to both grieve their lost comrades and to celebrate their victory against the Tyrells, the night the Northmen plucked the rose. As he walked towards the Lord's tents, the men greeted him with bows and cries. Brudarhof, Pridebane, Young Wolf, Lion Killer, those were the names that stuck. A few soldiers even asked when they'd take the fight to Highgarden. Lofty aspirations, but unlikely given the king's plans. "Robb," Domeric greeted as he stepped out of his own tent. The new lord of the Dread Fort had rallied after his father's death. The two Boltons had apparently been distant for most of his life. Then Domeric had nearly died from poison a few years ago and his father had barely let him out of his sight. Even now, a loud whispering trailed in his wake. Lord Roost's body had been given a full funeral in the Godswood of the Red Keep and his bones carefully prepared by the shepherds in the army. Domeric had sent them back to the Dread Fort for internment, along with strict orders that would begin putting things to rights. "How goes it, Dom?" Robb asked. "Quite well, Lord Robb. I'm glad to find you." Another declaration arrived from Casterly Rock. Domeric told him. "Another?" Robb said, "It seems like every 2 weeks the ravens go rushing out of the Westerlands. The king on the hill must have finally found out about your grandfather's passing," Domeric explained. "He's declared a new Lord Paramount of the Trident." They retreated into his tent and shared goblets of light wine. "What?" Robb growled. "Grandfather and Uncle Edmure have not even been dead a year. The boy thinks he can take my family's title when half the kingdoms deny his claim." Domeric eyed Greywind with caution. The direwolf angrily paced around his master. "Who has he named instead?" Robb wondered. Lord Bolton respectfully kept himself out of arm's reach when he answered, "Petter Baelish." The air of Winterfell crushed the cup in his hand, spilling wine onto the table. "By Brandon's blood, I'll kill that worm," Robb swore. To think his marriage to Aunt Lysa was bad enough on principle, now Littlefinger was using it to gain the title of a great house. "That's not all," Domeric added, as he turned to Wispin. The man stepped forward, quiet and unassuming as always. "At the behest of Lord Stark, the shepherds within the army have been attempting to gain eyes and ears into the Reach and Westerlands and maintain a watch on the Riverlands," Wispin began. "While it is slow goings in the enemy's land, the Riverlands are open to us. We have learned that Lord Baelish has already begun sending disguised couriers to meet with houses behind Lord Tully's back. And no one has reported these messages?" Robb asked. "Baelish is selective. We can confirm he attempted to contact House Root, and no doubt others whose loyalty to Riverrun he suspects is frail," Wispin replied. Robb closed his eyes. "We must keep a careful watch on the bannerman. My great-uncle cannot afford a betrayal." "Is House Tully really that fragile?" Domeric hesitated to ask. "I dearly hope not," Robb replied. It was a precarious question. The relationship between House Stark and Bolton had shifted dramatically in the course of their lifetime. Roose Bolton had stayed uncharacteristically loyal to Eddard Stark throughout his lordship. There was none of the typical trade and political tug-of-war that prevailed during peacetime in the north. Roose had kept to his own territory, content to build his alliance with the Ryswells and Dustins. Domeric was the culmination of those efforts. The new lord of the Dread Fort was the nephew of the next Lord Dustin, assuming his cousin could be safely ransomed from the Tyrells, and was the grandson of Lord Ryswell. These ties would secure the Boltons' power block for the next generation, more if it was carefully cultivated. Robb was uncertain about Domeric. Father had taken the lordling under his wing, guiding him through those early days after Lord Roost's funeral. Who could really say what plans House Bolton had for the future? What had Roose passed down to his son? There would be time to worry over things when the war was over. Robb stepped out of his tent, bidding Bolton goodbye. He had an appointment with his captains. Forward slash 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 forward slash. Move aside. Sir Roland Storm commanded. Another session of court was brought to a close. The king strode quickly past the spectators. He went straight for the small council chamber. When he burst through the doors, the council was already in full swing. Lord Marndale and Lord Valerian were overseeing sea charts while Lord Royce and Lord Mallister were arguing about supply trains. Maester Ullman was carefully preparing various documents and books. Carefully tucked away in a corner, Melisandre sat, a small brazier at her feet. Good, Ned thought, the farther away the witch stayed, the better. This council session is now in order, Maester Ullman declared. The king sat and quickly opened the discussion. The fighting in the Reach has begun in earnest. Lord Florent has mustered a sizable force and secured a number of small keeps north of Red Lake, including Crossbeams and Thorn Height. Mace Tyrell has sent Sir Loras to secure Highgarden's eastern lands. Jason Mallister leant forward, then the main roads to the Westerlands are secured. Yone continued, we expected House Hightower to reinforce the Redwynes and Tarlis, but Old Town has given no such orders. Lord Florent will secure the Western Reach, allowing us to close in on Highgarden. The king glanced to his side where a number of his aides sat. I'm afraid there is ill news, my lords, Darvo Seaworth added. There are signs that Highgarden and Casterly Rock have been speaking. Ships have been travelling up the Marndale with Westerland gold. Ned spoke up, you believe they are striking a deal with the Lannisters? Once the alliance is struck, the Westerlands will attack the Florents. The king nodded. If the Tyrells convince Lord Tywine their daughter's maidenhood is intact, Margaery could become Joffrey's queen. Then we need to strike first, Lord Valerian insisted. Send out the royal fleet to meet the Redwynes and then set our sails to Highgarden. Once the Fat Flower has been brought to heel, the Westerlands will have to fall in line. Not even Tywine Lannister could keep his vassals in line with the entire kingdom set against them. If I may, your grace, Willis Marndale interrupted. There is one obstacle to this course of action. Dawn, Ned said aloud. That quieted the small council. The unspoken shadow that had stayed in the background of their plans and schemes. The Martells will never bow to the Lannisters. Mallister argued. They don't need to bow, Ned countered, they just need to stop the royal fleet from entering the summer sea. Yone looked at Ned. Lord Stark is correct. The Dornish have yet to publicly pledge themselves to the Iron Throne. If they block the passage of our ships, then we have no way to counter the Redwyne fleet. It would leave the Florents to the mercy of our enemies. Stannis ground his teeth. The king likely wanted to face the Dornish with the kingdom united behind him. Now he had to negotiate. Send the quickest raven you have to Sunspear, he ordered Maester Ullman. Doran Martell is to present himself before the Iron Throne as soon as possible, to swear himself to my crown. While this matter of Dorne is being settled, the North shall rally with the Riverlands. We will gather the Stormlands and Vale to begin our push into the Reach. Ned stood back as Stannis' small council put his plans into motion. He noticed the gentle crackle of Melisandre's brazier grow stronger. The Red Priestess had laid fresh kindling into it, taking deep breaths of the hazy smoke. He was not the only one watching the witch. The naked lust in Lord Valerian's eyes was disquieting. Desire was the bane of a weak man's loyalty, whether for gold or flesh. With permission from the king, Ned left the chamber. He sought out his own circle of advisors. Karstark, Umber, Hornwood, Sewin, Marndale, Locke and Mormont followed him to the Godswood. He nodded to the group of Northmen casually sitting at the entrance and moved towards the deeper groves. Small pits and fresh soil were spread across a square of freshly cleared ground. Just one of many changes to the place. The secluded acre had been slowly morphed by the Northerners in residence at the Red Keep. Since its creation, the Godswood of King's Landing had been a largely performative set piece. The Targaryens had named it a hallowed place in acknowledgement of Torrhen Stark's submission to the conquest, but it held no weirwoods and the heartree was nothing but a large oak. Cregan Stark had called it a mummer's set when he visited the capital. Thankfully, to the Andals of the south it was still a strange place, and mostly avoided by the inhabitants. The gardeners of the castle were diligent, but they did the minimum to keep the plants healthy and the trees contained. Ned had quietly informed them that his own servants would take over its care. Shepherd Tiller spoke in the stead of the great shepherd while they were in the south. She directed a dozen men and women to the task of properly preparing the god's wood. They had taken shears, shovels and hoes to the grounds. "Shepherd Dunnery," Ned called out. The woman in question looked up from her tea in the shade of a listing elm. Shepherd Dunnery, an elderly woman with deep wrinkles and a single silver tooth, had come south with the supply wagons to act as a cook. Lady Tiller swore Dunnery was the most experienced woods nurse in the army. Dunnery was the senior shepherd of Snowgem, a small hamlet nestled in the green cradle forest by the Grey Hills. Snowgem was an ancient shepherd settlement with one trade, the care and nurturing of weirwood saplings. With dedication and sacred traditions passed down through the generations, the shepherds of Snowgem had grown hundreds of saplings. These saplings were carried across the north to God's woods in keeps, villages, and sacred places. Weirwoods were resilient trees, but time, weather and disaster felled them just the same. "Magna," the elder greeted with a slow curtsy, "it is an honor." A murmur to his right drew Ned's eye when Moore emerged from his resting place among the leaves of the ground oaks. His wolf came to rest at his side. Moore accepted a small touch and then settled for tasting the air and watching the skies. "Your work lifts my spirits with every visit," Ned tells her. She was a kind woman, but her mind did best when focused on her plants. "Shepherd, I seek a place of quiet to converse with my advisors." Dunnery looked at him for a second, glanced down at Moore, and smiled, her silver tooth catching the afternoon light. She turned to a young woman carefully cutting away the weeds growing near a young white shoot. "Maywin, visa dissen magnas igen Ruyenvolk," Dunnery ordered. "Take these magnas to the place of secrets," Ned translated. The girl, only a few years older than Sansa, nervously ran over to them. "Follow me, Magnas," she quietly said. Ned and his vassals were led through narrow paths cut between the trees and bushes along the perimeter of the godswood until their route ended in a tiny clearing ringed by thick drooping cottonwoods. Ned glanced down at the girl. "We will not be overheard." Maywayne shook her head. "Not even by the wargs, Ian Furulf," she demurred. Ned blinked and stared. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked. The girl was visibly sweating, probably fearing she'd overstepped her bounds. "From my teachers, Magna," she told him. "They say you are blessed by the old gods, you are the father of wolves, both beast and man. You shall make us strong." Shocked at her own words, Maywayne hastily curtsied and fled back into the trees. "Always a charmer, my lord." Great Jon joked. "Certainly more than you," Umber Mage Mormont said. "I remember your fumbling courtships." How many girls suddenly remembered a promised dance after a few minutes of your wit? The lords and ladies chuckled at the Great Jon. "Show him mercy," Mage Ned said as he joined them. "We have much to speak about. The king's mind is set." His friends and counselors looked to him. "I'm afraid this war is far from over." Forward slash 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 forward slash. Notes. A forward slash n. Hello everybody. We're now going to dive right into the aftermath of the War of the Three Kings. The Lannisters and Tyrells have no choice but to look to each other for allies, but how will the Martells react to Stannis' commands? The Starks once again must separate. Arya will remain in King's Landing, a witness to the politics of Stannis' rule. Ned and Robb march to battle in the Riverlands. Catelyn must begin preparing Bran for his future as a Lord Paramount. Sansa will have to govern Winterfell on her own. Rickon is just glad he can play with Shaggydoak, and Jon will have to freeze for a bit longer. Thanks for reading. C&C is appreciated. Chapter 45, Songs of Home. Chapter text. Another day in King's Landing began for Arya Stark, lady-in-waiting to Princess Shireen Baratheon. Her father's departure had left many rooms in their wing of the castle empty. The steward had arranged for new chambers for Arya closer to Princess Shireen. Annoyingly, she had 6 guards assigned to her. They worked in pairs and followed her around most days. 2 of them, Morris Flint and Clave Locke, were her favorites. They didn't take themselves too seriously, and indulged Arya's frequent odd requests. They were also the least afraid of Birena. Morris claimed it was because he had Stark blood from one of his great-great-grandparents. Clave insisted it was because Morris was half feral himself. They had both fought with Rob in the Riverlands. They proved themselves to her brother, and that was good enough for father. Her new room had an excellent view of the castle's towering spires. Arya had quickly noticed the flocks of birds that gathered along the rooftops. Drawing on her lessons with Bourne, she spent a few days watching into the healthiest-looking ones. Arya knew her parents would disapprove, but she'd asked the shepherds that had stayed behind once the army left. They warned her about using the animals to eavesdrop. It was essential her watching did not draw undue attention. Arya felt she could serve beside the princess and gather useful information from the other inhabitants of the castle. She'd broken her fast at the crack of dawn, then settled into a comfortable chair to connect with one of her birds. The castle staff were told that she had important lessons to be completed each morning, and only her personal attendants were permitted to intrude early in the morning. Even they knew better than to interrupt this early. Today she felt like flying down to the docks. Sir Seaworth had mentioned new ships docking recently. Her wings took her over the cobble streets and early morning crowds to the docks set along Blackwater Bay. Sailors and officials walked between ships and warehouses, moving cargo and animals. She saw men with gold piercings and bright-dyed hair trading bags of spice, while sailors bedecked in silks haggled for fresh fruit and wine. They spoke a dozen tongues, with West AOC being the common trade language between them all. Arya spotted one ship that was wholly unique. The sails were large squares emblazoned with intricate yellow designs. Very few sailors disembarked. In fact, she noticed most of the crew working on the deck. As she flew closer, her eyes picked out their thick metal collars. Slaves. Arya realized. This was a slave ship, and at the base of the plank was the captain. He wore expensive clothes with some spotted animal skin draped across his back and a tattoo of a sharp-toothed fish circling his neck. He seemed to be arguing with the dockmaster. Arya flew in for a closer look, perching carefully on one of the dock poles. Unlike Birina, a bird's ears and eyes were sharpened enough for her to understand speech and, if she truly concentrated, decipher writing. "I have an important representative aboard my ship. He has come straight from Volantis to speak with your king," the captain said. "I understand that, Captain Mayorona," the dockmaster replied. "Regardless, you must wait for a royal escort to bring your group up the castle. Your slaves are not permitted to freely wander the city, and you made it clear your passenger will not disembark without them. You expect a representative from the Temple of the Lord of Light to travel the streets unguarded. Especially through the scum that sleeps in your city's streets." Mayorona shouted back. The dockmaster simply stared the foreigner down until the Volanten sailor spit and stormed back onto his ship. Arya took flight again and realized the sun was well clear of the horizon. It was time to help Shireen prepare for the day. She carefully closed her connection to the bird and awoke in her own body, quickly dressing and leaving for the royal quarters. By chance she would see Captain Mayorona in person a few days later, during a private court session open only to petitioners invited by the king himself. Arya was seated with the princess in the wings of the chamber with the other nobles working under the royal family. Whenever a new guest entered, the girls around her would immediately start to gossip, sharing what secrets they'd overheard, or just commenting on their looks and attire. As the only heir to the Iron Throne, Shireen was ordered by her father to attend many of his duties, to watch and learn. Captain Mayorona wore a slightly cleaner coat and hat, with the same pelt. He stood at the back of a procession of Isozi, led by 3 men in scarlet-red robes. These were red priests, like Lady Melisandre or Sir Thoros. Following them were men and women in collars and cuffs, all with tattoos of flames on their cheeks and foreheads. They were the first slaves Arya had ever seen in person. It was uncomfortable. Arya knew it was against the laws of the old and new gods to enslave others. It was a lesson she was taught years ago. Knowing something is supposed to be taboo and seeing it was very different. It made her angry, though her face remained calm except for a small frown. Lady Glover had taught her how to hide anger. Only babies had tantrums, Lady Glover always said. Little Irina certainly made enough noise to wake the whole keep. "Hail to King Stannis Baratheon, first of his name, Lord Protector of the 7 Kingdoms, true and faithful of Arla," the leading visitor exclaimed. His accent wasn't nearly as heavy as Arya expected. It carried a different tilt and roll than the few other Isozi she'd eavesdropped on. He was a thoroughly average-looking man with dark hair, a thin mustache, and bright red stones pierced in his eyebrows and bottom lip. Lady Melisandre spoke first, before even the king, and the chosen of the Lord of Light, Azor Ahai. The priest bowed deeper but said no more. The king nodded down. Be welcome, Dracaro of Volantis. Dracaro rose with a greedy smile. It is my honor to present his grace with a letter of well wishes from the noble rulers of the first daughter, and tokens of appreciation from High Priest Ben-Ero. A pair of slaves brought forward chests and boxes and slowly began to pull out treasures, clothes and jewelry. King Stannis waved his own servants forward to retrieve the gifts. You may convey my thanks for this gesture, the king replied. What business do you have with the Iron Throne? High Priest Ben-Ero, the Triarch of Volantis, and many of their wealthy subjects wish to see your kingdom prosper, King Stannis Dracaro explained. They strongly believe generous terms of trade could be made between your kingdom and our city, benefiting all. You are but one of many merchants and emissaries who seek an audience with me, the king commented. This offer from Volantis may need to wait until other, smaller, matters are dealt with. The Red Priest looked undaunted. Arya wondered if he knew what the king was going to say. Robb had told her lots of important deals were made in private, but you needed to present it a certain way in public. Then I would be overjoyed to offer my services to your grace, Dracaro offered. I have spent many years advising and negotiating trade on behalf of my temple. No doubt with some of the men who have traveled here today. King Stannis nodded. Your offer is equally generous as your gifts. Lady Melisandre can inform you of the day's schedule. The court leapt into a flurry of activity. The rest of Dracaro's group were quickly ushered out of the throne room while the priest joined Melisandre on the dais, where they began whispering above a smouldering torch. Arya barely had time to pass Princess Shireen a handkerchief to wipe her brow before the doors opened again and a new group entered. // Dear father. I hope all is well in the Riverlands and that you are in good health. King's Landing is a strange place, there's too many people, especially compared to home. It's lonely without you or Robb around. Birina keeps me company, and if I ever need anything Morris and Clave are eager to help. The shepherds are doing a great job with the Godswood. I'm going to work up the courage to bring Princess Shireen soon. I remember what you told me, about how being the princess lady was important, how it was a duty to our family. I'm doing a good job. I'm making friends, and avoiding the girls that don't like me so there's less fighting. Princess Shireen actually defended me when one of them made fun of my accent. More red priests have come to the city. There's an important one from Volantis who is working for Lady Melisandre, and now 6 or 7 more have joined them. They are unnerving. I'm just glad they weren't permitted to keep their slaves while visiting. Sir Willis has been very busy on the small council. He's brokering new deals with a lot of foreigners. Merchants from the free cities and even nobles. Sir Davos told Shireen they are very interested in supporting the king. He said even the Iron Bank is sending people to meet the king. That seems to be a very big deal. I've been keeping up my old tongue. Not just speaking it but writing too. Look. The Red Keep is full of eavesdroppers. Robb said that if we ever wanted to keep things secret, we should use the old tongue. Shireen was told by her father not to speak about important matters in rooms outside of the royal family's suites. I figured out that lots of people talk more openly in the small courtyards around the castle, where they can stand far from any walls or windows. It gets hot under the sun, so everyone prefers to stand under the shade of trees, and what can sit unnoticed in the trees? Birds. Which means me. I'm being careful, following all of Bourne's lessons, but you wouldn't believe what I've found out. Over the last few weeks more and more ships from Essos have arrived, all carrying merchants who are really eager to make new deals. Sir Seaworth says that the lords of the Narrow Sea and lots of other houses that own ports are happy. On the other hand, people have been talking about all the red priests that have shown up, and the king doesn't seem that popular to begin with. I heard people complaining that the king hasn't rewarded anyone yet for the victories against the Lannisters and Tyrells, but the war is still going, isn't it? It doesn't help that King Stannis still hasn't met with the High Septon. Princess Shireen told me their whole family went to attend service at the Grand September of Baelor but the doors were barred to them. He was so angry he stormed back to the Red Keep and began meeting with the Gold Cloaks. The devout nobles are starting to whisper and meet somewhere out in the city. Some of the guards mentioned there were preachers in Flea Bottom speaking out against the king. Whatever they are saying has to be bad. A few days later, the steward announced the dragon pit would be reopened and workers were being hired to clear the rubble. At first I thought maybe the king was going to try and bring dragons back. Instead, he gave the dragon pit to Lady Melisandre. She's brought the other red priests down there to preach to the small folk about Arla. I think she's going to turn the whole building into a new temple. The Septons won't be happy about that. Next time you come to the city, keep an eye out for any knights wearing a red cloak. They're red knights who have converted, like the Queen. They've started going out into the city to guard Lady Melisandre. Sir Willis is worried the disagreements could get violent. I heard him whispering with Lord Royce about the Faith regaining their stars and swords. Another thing to look up in the library. Princess Shireen told me the Dornish are sending an envoy to come swear fealty to the king. I know you never talked about Queen Elia, but I hope the Martells don't hate me just because I'm a Stark. That would make things awkward. I hope I spelt it all right. I have written to Mother and Bran too, though I think Bran is too busy riding to reply. Whatever stories you end up telling him, make sure you tell me as well. I don't want him being able to hold that over me. I plan on writing to you again soon. Be safe, Ian. Don't forget to wear my amulet. I love you. From your cleverest daughter, Arya. // Does this dress seem appropriate? Princess Shireen asked her attendants. They had all gathered in the royal quarters to prepare for the arrival of the Dornish delegation. Their ship had docked yesterday afternoon and they would officially be entering the Red Keep today. Arya had carefully chosen a well-made grey dress with blue and white accenting. It was pretty enough to meet the standards of the court but was unlikely to outshine the princess wardrobe. The princess had been adorned in a yellow dress with black cording and heavy onyx pendants. Left on the floor was the dark red shawl the queen had sent along with the outfit. "You look wonderful, princess," the girls all answered. Arya joined in. She knew the princess would ask for her true opinion later. Princess Shireen had formed a closer relationship over the past 2 months with Arya, Daisa Redfort, Sarah Mertins and surprisingly Ellie Massey, the granddaughter of Lord Jerome Massey. Ellie's uncle, Sir Justin Massey, was a close servant of the Queen and rumour had it, was aiming to be given land and titles after the war. Ellie was a quick-witted girl, though she was a bit too eager to try out new things. She'd nearly fallen from her pony on their first time riding in the yard. "Do you think Prince Doran has come in person?" someone asked. "You think he would not come himself?" another girl answered. "The king summoned him specifically." Princess Shireen turned to Arya as the girls began to bicker. "Father doesn't like being disobeyed, but the Dornish are known for disobeying the Iron Throne, aren't they?" Arya nodded along, not to mention Prince Doran lost family during the rebellion. "Father said the Dornish stayed away from King's Landing after King Robert was crowned." Sarah leaned in. "Well, someone answered the king's summons. Hopefully, they understand what they are getting into." A gaggle of servants and soldiers arrived to escort the princess down to the courtyard. Arya was eager to see the Dornish. She knew there were a few in residence around King's Landing, but they stayed clear of the castle. Mother had never been very fond of them, and father always spoke with polite disinterest. Jon told her the Dornish treated their bastard children more favorably than other kingdoms, which was a mark in their favor. The gates to the Red Keep opened and riders in bright yellow and glittering copper rode in. Each one bore the sun and spear of House Martells. At the center of the group, one man stood out. He was tall, even from horseback, and rode with an easy grace. From a distance Arya could only make out his thin eyebrows and sharp nose. His hair was thick, black with whispers of silver. His clothes glinted in the morning sun, with bright patterns and swirling colors falling across his shoulders and arms. The man's appearance caused a huge commotion. People were shocked, scandalized, excited, their expressions ran the gamut. Ellie excitedly grabbed Arya's arm. "It's the Red Viper," she exclaimed. "Prince Oberyn," Arya said. "They say he's been to every kingdom of Westeros, fought his way across Essos, visited all of the free cities and slain every man who ever challenged him. Ellie gushed. He hasn't been to the north, Arya grumbled. Prince Oberyn dismounted while the rest of the sizable Dornish contingent arrived. They wore lemons, vultures, crowned skulls and scorpions. People spilled from the carriages. The Dornish had come in strong numbers. That was a good sign, Arya thought. They wouldn't have arrived with so many nobles unless they planned to stay. Arya hoped she'd get to speak with them. She liked meeting new people, and her siblings would be impressed if she could claim friends from a far-off kingdom. Princess Shireen had begun nervously playing with her sleeves. Arya subtly brushed her shoulder against the princess. Shireen glanced over to her. Arya gave her a reassuring smile, which Shireen returned. The princess straightened her back and joined her family as they descended the steps to meet Prince Oberyn and his escort. Prince Oberyn fluidly bowed with his arm thrown to the sky. "Your Grace," he began, "I bring greetings and congratulations from my brother, Prince Doran Nymerus Martell. We were overjoyed to hear you had defeated Joffrey Hill and secured your rightful throne." King Stannis was unmoved. He barely reacted at all. "If your brother is so pleased at my victory, then he should be here before me." Oberyn looked up and smiled. "Our prince has taken ill and on the advice of his maesters has refrained from travel. My brother has sent me in his stead, with his full authority." The king's jaw tensed. "Then as a representative of Dorne, be welcome, Prince Oberyn. Quarters have been prepared for your party. I invite you to attend the small council session this afternoon." A curt greeting, typical of the king. The Dornish looked shocked at his abrupt tone. The Red Viper remained calm. Oberyn bowed his head. "I will happily accept your offer, your grace." Faster than may have been appropriate, the king turned and stomped back into the castle. Queen Sliss followed in his wake, dragging Princess Shireen with her. Arya guessed she would be summoned later, once Shireen was free of the queen's lecture. The rest of the attendants left to tend to their own matters while the army of servants began greeting and guiding the new guests. Arya made sure to lock eyes with her guards before turning to visit the Godswood for a morning prayer and maybe some snacks. She was stopped by a small group of Dornishmen approaching her. One was clearly a lord. He had a magnificent surcoat atop clearly expensive Dornish silks and cloth. Delicately stitched into his collar was a crowned skull. Atop his head was a strange cap with long ribbons that fell down his neck. He shared quite a few features with Prince Oberyn. At his back were two boys, one nearly a man, a few years older than Robb, and the other of age with the princess. "Pardon me, my lady," the nobleman said, "I was hoping to ask for directions from someone familiar with the Red Keep." Arya was suspicious. "Hello, my lord," she replied. The man stopped and stared at her in wonder. "A northern noblewoman? In King's Landing of all places? I think you may be lost, my dear," he chuckled. She heard Morris and Clave step forward behind her. "Seeing as I am an attendant to Princess Shireen Baratheon, I think I'm in the right place," she threw back. Arya had been told repeatedly her voice singled her out immediately to most people, and her accent had only gotten stronger the more she used the old tongue. When Jon had returned from Skagos, he'd sounded like a mountain clansman. Lord Glover said it was the mark of the first men that persisted long after their language became a secret. That surprised the Dornish lord. "Forgive my ignorance, my lady, but I seem to be tired from the long journey," he apologized. "May I have the honor of your name?" Arya waited a few moments before saying, "I am Lady Arya Stark of Winterfell." The lord again took a moment to compose himself. "Then it is an honor, Lady Stark. I am Dagos Manwadi, Lord of Kingsgrave, and these are my sons Mors and Daikon." Arya curtsied to all three, content now they'd bothered to introduce themselves. "What are you hoping to find, Lord Manwadi?" she asked. "The royal kennels. We hoped to get proper food and water for our hounds," he explained. "You brought hounds all the way from Dorne?" Arya asked. The Manwadi children chuckled. The eldest leaned forward. "Our father would take his precious hounds to Yeti if he thought he'd get away with it." Lord Manwadi smiled indulgently. "My boys are just jealous. They know who I treat the best on journeys like this. How could I deny my girls the chance to hunt in the vaunted Kingswood?" Arya laughed as the Dornish men bickered back and forth. She heard her guards also chuckle. "I know the kennel master very well, my lord. I'd be happy to introduce you," Arya said. Maybe if she made a good impression on Lord Dagos he would introduce her to Prince Oberyn. They followed her out of the courtyard and along the outer pathways, making idle chatter. They told her about the voyage from Sunspear, and how it was the boys' first journey by sea. Neither had been fond of the experience, though Arya dearly wished she could sail the ocean one day. "So what is your interest in the kennel, Lady Stark? Do you have a passion for the hunt?" Mors asked. "I have my own hounds," in fact she proudly said. "Really, I've always found hunts boring. Birina, Varys and Aera take most quarry down quite quickly. We trapped quite a lot at Deepwood Motte, where I was fostered." They rounded the last corner into the kennel's courtyard. Lord Manwadi said, "I know all too well the curse of overager animals. Did you raise them as whelps?" Arya caught sight of Kennel Master Darin and waved. "Birina's mother had her litter in Winterfell, and the pups were split between my brothers and sisters. We got Varys and Aera while I was fostering with House Glover," she explained. Rather than walking right up the expansive main kennels, Arya walked around the building to the smaller kennels that faced the back of the yard. Specifically chosen to keep Birina out of the way of any errant riders or visitors. "Birina! Biswa!" Arya shouted. Lord Manwadi began to question her strange command, when the gate of the kennel was thrown open by Birina's massive body. The gate slammed so hard into the brick wall its frame cracked. Her wolf lunged into the yard covered in dust from her morning nap. Birina locked her eyes on Arya and hunched forward. Arya took a deep breath, ready to stop Birina with a command before they both ended up needing a bath. She was interrupted. The Dornish seemed to be making a habit of it by all three Manwadi men jumping in front of her. Birina, like the well-trained girl she was, stopped in her tracks but stayed alert. Thankfully, the men were facing away from Arya. "Birina, unden," Arya commanded. The direwolf laid down on her stomach without hesitation. Arya took a quick step around the men and walked right up to Birina. "There you go," she said as Birina turned belly up. Arya glanced back at Lord Manwadi. "No need to be so frightened, my lord." The Dornishman slowly took his hand off the dagger on his hip. He threw a glance back to Arya's guards who were casually leaning against the kennel wall. "You said you had hounds, Lady Stark," Lord Dagos said. Arya tossed her hair out of her eyes. "I don't believe I ever said I only had hounds." Mors and Daikon could only stare at her. Their father began to smile. "I think our stay in King's Landing is going to be quite interesting. // // / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / / forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash. Oberyn was not impressed with King's Landing. It had changed little from his last visit. There were the same prissy nobles, starving people and general misery. He'd very nearly brought his wonderful daughters on the trip but decided against it. Stannis Baratheon was a cold rock of a man, and Oberyn would need to keep his full focus to get what he wanted. Blood from the stone, as the Maester said. He looked around the table at the small council. They were more competent than the usurper's gang of dullards. It was a pity the spider had fled. Oberyn was expecting the Master of Whisperers to stick around. He'd served Robert Baratheon willingly, strange that he would abandon his brother. The king entered the room. Oberyn diligently rose with the rest of the men. He was, after all, an advisor to the king. His pet red priestess followed close after. The usual pleasantries were shared, and mundane information thrown back and forth. The war in the west was taking all their attention. Oberyn knew armies were on the march to the Reach and Westerlands. If Doran had permitted, he'd have ridden with the lords of the north to the gates of Casterly Rock. Not even alone. He could have gathered 1,000 riders with ease, maybe more. Elya's memory was strong among his people. Prince Oberyn. Lord Royce finally turned to him. "We hope you bring good news from your brother." Oberyn smiled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the ground table. "Dorne is happy to see King Stannis on the throne," he began, "and Prince Doran is honored by your consideration of our kingdom. We would be happy to offer our support of your rule, under certain conditions." That drew the king's ire. Thankfully, Lord Royce was leading the conversation. "We hope you can understand the current war has taken almost all of the crown's focus and energies," Royce said. "Dorne understands your position," Oberyn replied. "We aren't here to ask for gold or silver. We have reasonable requests and ways to repay you. It was Lord Mallister who cut straight to the point. Myrcella Lannister, he said. Myrcella Hill, Oberyn corrected. She remains safe under guard in Sunspear. My brother is willing to return her to your custody. In exchange for? Royce asked. If they survive the coming battles, we wish for Amory Locke and Gregor Clegane. Oberyn stood as he made his proposition. 2 criminals, traitors to your crown. We also insist that when this war is ended, Tywin Lannister must be stripped of his titles, his land, and sent to the wall. That put most of the lords on their back foot. Except for the king, he was looking almost pleased. Is that all? The king asked. Oberyn didn't like the look of satisfaction on Stannis' face. Dawn is also prepared to support your efforts against the Tyrells. Oberyn hastily continued when the entire council focused on him, by deploying our fleets to block any passage through the southern seas. The master of ships seemed most interested in that offer. The king less so. Ships but no soldiers. The king clarified. Prince Doran sees no need to interfere with the brilliant military campaigns of your lords. Certainly, we do not wish to be accused of stealing their glory. Oberyn smirked. The prickly pride of his commanders would stay Stannis' demands. Lord Royce rubbed his beard. For the sake of formality, we would like to have the exact terms of this agreement in writing. Were they insisting because of his reputation, or because he was Dornish? A wonderful conundrum. Oberyn bowed his head. I would expect nothing less. Lord Manwadi would be best suited to work with you on the exact language. His distant cousin had a sharp wit, and he'd already begun spreading their eyes and ears around the keep. Getting him alone with the officials and scribes could only give them more insights. As the council session wrapped up, Oberyn resolved to visit his beloved Ellaria that night, as a reward for a job well done. His cousins would provide an excuse for him to sneak out after dinner. Doran would be happy enough with how the first meeting had gone. Oberyn had kept his promise and not engaged in any duels yet. Although his next assignment was set to be much more complicated. How exactly did his brother expect him to arrange the betrothal of Princess Shireen to Tristan? // Chapter 46, Songs of War. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Autumn in the north held its own kind of beauty. The summer snows were light and airy, coming and going with a gentle breeze. Once those passed, the next snow fell wet and heavy, cool to the touch but not freezing. A careful shift that prefaced the freezing cold brought by true winter. Sansa stood above Winterfell's courtyard, watching the children of the keep playing with a pair of shovels. The servants had finished clearing last night's snowfall and left their tools out. It was harmless fun so long as nothing was broken. The children deserved their games. Winterfell had been tense the longer the armies had been away. There were still enough soldiers to feel secure, but the people missed their families. Lady Sansa. She turned back and saw Maester Lewin at the door, a bundle of letters in hand. Sansa smiled to hide her sigh. She was the Lady of Winterfell, as her mother had been Lady of Riverrun when she was young. There was pressure and stress. She had just turned 4 and 10 and felt overwhelmed at times. At least she knew most of her family was safe. Mother, Arya and the boys were returning to Riverrun, Robb and father were surrounded by loyal men, and Jon had gotten word back to them through the shepherds that he and Born were with Uncle Benjen at the wall. Though what they had found beyond it had set a terrible wariness in them. Her day proceeded normally. She consulted with Steward Poole about the regular duties, then handed down directions to the headmaids and footmen. Winterfell ran smoothly in the absence of its lord and lady, though she did make a point of keeping up with her studies. Edara and Oma were her most constant companions, with occasional visits from other ladies and the odd lord. Sansa entertained with a rare skill. She was a gracious host, listening to her visitors' concerns and discussing what favors she had the authority to grant. None of them left Winterfell in a sour mood. Her repertoire of songs and poems grew with every visit, and her handmade gifts impressed the dourest northerner. On this particular day, Winterfell was hosting the Tall Hearts and the Umbers. Lady Bissa had come up from Torrens Square to meet with Oma and her mother. Her betrothal to Benfred Tallheart was nearly signed and sealed. They were both of age, which meant a short waiting period before their marriage. In fact, Both families had been eager to plan the wedding. The war made everyone nervous. The able heads of most houses had marched south with either father or Rob, and already there had been many casualties. House Hornwood was scrambling after the death of their heir at the hands of Jaime Lannister, while the Carstarks were still coming to terms with poor Ed's passing. Aelys had been inconsolable and her poor mother had gone into shock. The rumor was that Lord Carstark had been apoplectic with rage after recovering from his injuries. He had visited Winterfell briefly, limping and one-handed on his journey home. When Sansa had told him that Greywind had mauled the Kingslayer beyond recovery and the Lannister would never walk again, Lord Carstark had smiled for the first time since the battle. Torrhen had stepped up to help his father rule while Harryon remained in the south, a welcome ally to help reinforce the Dreadfort's domain. Lord Roost's death had shocked a great many people, and there had been rabble-rousing about sending a force to guard the Dreadfort and keep the lands in check. Her father had sent a letter with instructions to encourage the eastern houses to keep to their own territory. Domeric had selected a new castellan from among his family's servants, and House Ryswell had sent soldiers to reinforce their garrison. Robb wrote that the wounded from his campaign in the Riverlands and the siege of King's Landing were being escorted back north for recovery. Sansa has been preparing for their arrival, and she has followed father's instruction to provide funds for their care. She was overlooking the estimated costs for bandages, herbs and nursemaids, when Dons Argyll, Winterfell's new master-at-arms, entered in a rush. "My lady," he called out, "you must come with me to the first hall." Sansa stood to follow Dons. "What's the matter?" "A rider from Greywater Watch just arrived," Dons explained. Sansa stood, calling Lady to her side, and followed Dons down the hallway. Dons stepped around her and opened the doors to the first hall. "Stand for Lady Sansa, the Stark in Winterfell," he announced. The assembled servants, armsmen and noble guests all turned to her and bowed. They had just finished lunch by the look of things. There were still plates and jugs set out. Sansa quickly ascended the small dais at the front of the hall and took a seat in the large oaken throne, the one her father sat in when passing judgment. Dons waved forward a woman standing apart from the crowd, the messenger from Greywater Watch. She was short and slim, with long hair tied into functional braids. Her green eyes peered up at Sansa. She wore a practical outfit of riding leathers and a heavy cloak. Around her neck was a bronze chain and a disc bearing a lizard lion and an inscription in Old Tongue, "Within our sight, wood and earth are one." No wonder this was brought to her attention. The medallion was the signet of House Reed. This woman spoke with the voice of the Cranogman. "Step forward," Sansa ordered. The messenger came to the foot of the dais and went to one knee. "Lady Stark, thank you for receiving me. I am Mira Reed, daughter of Lord Howland Reed of Greywater Watch." Sansa smiled. She knew that Lord Howland was a good and loyal friend to her family. "Lady Reed, be welcome." Sansa gestured for bread and salt to be brought forward. "I was told you had an important message." Mira swallowed her mouth full of bread and took a deep breath. "I must bring ill tidings, my lady," she began. "I was dispatched by my father 3 days ago to ride here with all haste. He feared our raven would not reach you. Moat Cailin has fallen." The audience gasped and Sansa's heart skipped a beat. She was too stunned to speak. Dons stepped forward. "How is this possible?" he asked. Lady Reed looked straight forward, ignoring the rising conversation around her. "The Ironborn landed north of the Neck and attacked with great speed and surprise," she told them. "My father led the garrison through 4 days of heavy fighting. Every raven sent was shot down. On the 5th day, the raiders breached the fortified walls and my father was forced to retreat. He has sent ravens to as many keeps as possible but wanted to ensure Winterfell was notified." The hall rose to thunderous volumes. People were shouting, nearly screaming. Mira's composure finally broke. On her knees she pleaded, "Lady Stark, my father fought with everything he had. Less than 100 of his men survived. Even now, he has returned to strike at the Ironborn and bleed them." Sansa took deep breaths, trying to calm herself. She looked at all the people before her. They were angry, offended, scared. She wanted to curl up in a ball, to run to her room and hide under the covers until her parents came for her. She couldn't do any of that. She was here, sitting in the seat of her forebears. She was Lady Sansa, the Stark in Winterfell. "By bronze and blood, I am Stark to my bones. Your vows I shall take, your oaths I shall honor, your secrets I will hold." Let the old gods hear and know, I am stark down to my bones. She swore those words before the crypt of Bran the Builder, on the night Robb marched south. Sansa meant every word, she still does. There is winter in her bones. Like her father and many others before her, she would not be cowed by the rampage of savage squids. Sansa grit her teeth and stood. Silence. She yelled, it was the howl of the wolf in the woods. It echoed in the walls and demanded attention. Her people quieted and drew closer to her throne. Dance took a step onto the dais and kneeled, mirroring Meera. Meera Reed, you have done your house proud in delivering this news. Your family has always fought to protect the North, and we will remember your losses with the same honor as those who died in the Whispering Wood, Sansa declared. She saw Meera's shoulders slump with relief. Sansa took a moment to compose her thoughts, thinking quickly. She had to maintain control, at least for the moment. The lords could take control of the battlefield, but a Stark had to remain in charge here. This is an act of war. The Iron Islands have once again stepped upon our soil and laid claim to what will never be theirs. My father and brothers fight for us in the south, heeding the call of King Stannis. I have no doubt they will return when they can, but when has the North ever needed to be commanded to defend our people, she asked. The men and women roared back, never. She turned to Maester Lewin, send ravens to every house we can reach, tell them Winterfell commands them to ready their swords. Dance, arm the garrison and begin preparing the castle, we shall ready what men remain. Dance smiled at her, it shall be done, Lady Stark. Sansa was not prepared for war. She could not lead an army, but she could lead her people. It's what her father and mother trained her to do. Lady Reed, as I understand it, your people have ways to contact the shepherds of Skagos. Meera looked up, her spine straight, I can reach the great shepherd. Do so, Sansa instructed, she then turned back to the throne and sat. Dignified and calm. Good people, we must prepare. When my father returns, he shall find a land whole and victorious. The calls were sent out and men swiftly marched to guard the roads heading deeper into the north. Not just the regular recruits from Wintertown and their vassals, many of the workers from the Wolf's Canal eagerly took up arms. From the camps, at least 200 veterans of the last Greyjoy rebellion answered Sansa's call to arms. Rather than the lengthy journey by foot, Dance and Sir Roderick commandeered barges and boats and quickly sent their force down the White Knife. The respect Robb had won in the Riverrun was valuable currency for Sansa to spend now. Her carefully worded messages to the mountain clans were warmly received, and soon enough her distant kin were moving west to join with the Mormonts and Glovers. A private meeting with the Tall Hearts revealed the true origin of the Stony Shore raids from years ago, and the Ironborn prisoners that were still held in Torrens Square. It was useful, Sansa decided, to have a pretext for not just this retaliation, but any further action her father deemed necessary. The Stark forces were led by Sir Roderick and Dance, marshalling all the troops left behind from Robb's march. She had already received a reply from White Harbor. Marlon Marndale was appointed steward of the city and had begun gathering men to retake Moat Cailin and set their fleet to patrol the coastline. He would cross the newly completed Knight's Bridge and approach from the east. Sansa worried the Ironborn had been given too much time to prepare, they still had their fleet anchored somewhere in the Salt Spear. She awaited word from Barrowtown on their movements and she hoped the Fever River could be used to cut off the invaders from the west. These were trying times, Sansa prayed daily but only in the morning. The gods alone would not save her people or protect her lands. It would be wood, steel and heart that repelled the Ironborn. Wood, steel and heart. // Relive your archers, Lord Donijah. The garrison has fled to the Black Tower. Ned sat at his temporary desk, maps and missives spread out like a meal before him. He blinked, he would have to call for supper, he must be getting hungry. Lord Donijah bowed and left, quickly replaced by Orin Argyll, who had stepped into the role as his aide. The boy had become a man since the battle on the Stony Shore and was now a trusted sword at Ned's side, much as his brother was trusted with the defense of Winterfell. Sir Ruthermont and Lord Linadilly are asking for permission to bring up the ladders, Orin explained. How close are they to the battlement? Ned asked, pulling close the sketch of the Golden Tooth. 3 weeks they had been camped along the river road. They had arrived in the Copper Pikes in full force after swiftly capturing 2 minor keeps and promptly made themselves known to the castle. Ned had ridden out with the lords of the Vale and Riverlands to broach terms with Lord Leo Lefford. It had been a brief discussion. Lord Lefford refused to yield his keep, citing ancient laws of honor and fealty to House Lannister. The Golden Tooth had always held the gateway to the Westerlands, and House Lefford had never given it up without bloodshed. Lord Leo was not wont to break that tradition. The stout castle sat along the highest ridge in the hills, a long curtain wall snaked down and across the path, with 3 heavy towers overlooking both the road and the thick brush below. Ned had named the towers Red, Black and White, and split his army to harass each one individually. If they could push the garrison back up to the castle proper, they would be able to breach the first gate and rally against the Tooth itself. Ned and Orin were interrupted by the hard hooves of a rider approaching their tent. An urgent message for Lord Stark, a man announced. Orin quickly stepped out to take the message. The letter bore the seal of House Reed. Ned ripped the missive open and saw runes laid in sloppy ink. Ned. Time is against me. The Ironborn have sailed down the Fever River. They have come for the moat. We have held 2 of the towers, but they have been scavenging from the ruins to create a path up the causeway. Once they are done they can scale the new connecting wall. I do not believe that the defenses will hold another day. Victorian Greyjoy leads an army of reavers and I fear where he will strike next. I will take my men deep into the swamps, but these slave-takers will not rest easily. I shall seep poison and death into their ranks. I am sending this message by foot to Seaguard, and hope that the Mallisters will ensure it reaches you. You have your own obligations, but the North will need a leader to repel Balon's latest folly. By bronze and iron, House Reed stands with House Stark. Your friend, Howland. Ned held his breath, praying this was nothing more than a waking nightmare. He knew it was all too real. That was the worst part. Balon Greyjoy had flaunted the terms of his defeat. The dead raiders burned upon the stony shore were proof of the Lord Reaper's recklessness. Never did Ned think that Balon would invade. Raid, yes. Send his ships to scourge the shipping routes, yes. What foolishness had driven Balon to this? Ned shook his head. At least the Greyjoys had better timing this go around. The North would have to handle this alone. The rest of the kingdoms were committed to Stannis' war and no one could risk losing the new king's favor now. Orin, fetch the lords and get Robb here, now he commanded. The camp was already in a busy state. It took nearly an hour to herd his commanders and vassals into one tent, with Robb arriving last. Ned pulled his son aside and gave him Howland's missive while Ned addressed the crowd. Needless to say they did not take his news gracefully. Gratian had to be physically restrained by his son to stop him from throwing Ned's desk end over end. I will have silence. Ned called out. Thankfully he had no need to bring more into the matter. The men and women turned their focus to him. We must return, Lord Flint cried out, echoed by others. Ned shook his head. Our oaths to King Stannis and the Valyman require our army to remain, he said. He held up a hand to silence them once again. The soldiers left in the north are doubtlessly rallying at this very moment to retake the moat. Winterfell, White Harbor and Barrowtown have not been left defenseless. Lord Reed is reorganizing his own troops as well. Bogmen, someone snorted. Robb spoke to that insult. Anyone here who has stood against the sword of the morning may continue to speak ill of Lord Reed, but I would encourage the rest of you to mind your tongues. But we cannot do nothing. Donal Locke said. And we will not, Ned reassured. He grabbed his son by the shoulder. Robb shall lead a force against the moat from the south. Together with the forces gathered by Winterfell, we shall crush the Ironborn between us. Swiftly, a force of cavalry and infantry was gathered from the northern forces and Lords Flint, Norrie, and Stout volunteered to lead them. As Robb and Grey Wind readied to depart, Ned gave him his final instructions. Rally with the Mallisters, and then have the shepherds accompanying you contact Howland. He'll have a better idea of the weaknesses in the moat. Hopefully, the Dustins and the Marndaelis have also begun mustering. If you hit the Ironborn from two sides, they will falter. Robb nodded. Should I stay to reinforce the castle once we've repelled the Greyjoys? Ned ran a hand across his chin. I don't know. Victorian Greyjoy is a dangerous warrior. Who can guess at the orders he's been given? We can only hope that their army remains at Moat Cailin until you arrive there. If they scatter, you will have to pursue them, Ned insisted. The lords will not remain here while our home is pillaged. I understand, Father Rob agreed, donning his helmet. Be safe, my son, Ned said. May the old gods watch over you. // A rose is a thorn dressed in red silk, whose reach is prickly and thick. I must be careful with my hands, lest my fingers be cut at the ends. Ricard looked up from his wax tablet, surveying his audience's reaction. The small group of boys, girls and elders looked at him with a bevy of expressions. Most of them were amused, some disturbed. More at his lack of talent than anything else. Ricard scratched out those 2 lines, perhaps, another metaphor. Indeed, young Riswell, something more delicate. You have a habit of always putting danger in your poetry, a wizened voice said from behind him. He turned in his chair to send a wide smile at the stooped figure of Lady Olenna Tyrell as she entered the courtyard. Southern poetry emphasizes the beauty of your homeland. Unfortunately for me, there are really only so many ways to describe rocks and snow, Ricard joked, earning him a smattering of laughs. After his arrival in Highgarden, he'd very swiftly learned the best way to present himself amongst his captors was as the witty barbarian. Lady Olenna narrowed her gaze at him, as she usually did. Ricard suspected his act was not quite foolproof. There were certain nobles in the castle who were more cautious of his facade. Come now, young Riswell, join me, Olenna ordered. Ricard stood and bid his goodbyes to the Redwine cousins he was sitting with. A guard moved out of the courtyard's corner to trail Ricard onto a balcony overlooking the expansive gardens. Olenna was already seated, a platter of cheese, fruit and goblets of wine laid out. She gestured for him to sit. Ricard settled down and waited for his hostess to eat before cutting apart a peach for himself. Have you heard the latest news? Olenna asked him. Ricard swallowed and neatly wiped his fingers. The matriarch of House Tyrell was very particular about manners, and especially how those manners related to your perceived intelligence. The gossip makes it hard to know what is true and what is wishful thinking, Ricard replied. Olenna scoffed. The gossip is where wishful thinking becomes truth. I know you've made nice with Lord Tarley and his heir. Those 2 men have no skill in subtlety. Daikon is a good lad, he keeps the confidence of his house. It's not his fault that certain news doesn't seem like it should be kept quiet, and Lord Tarley is always eager to discuss tactics. It just so happens that the most recent battles are excellent for analysis, Ricard explained. Olenna huffed, taking a delicate nibble of a cracker. Regardless of who your boyish charm has swayed, I will ask again, what have you heard? Ricard decided that pushing Olenna's patience would be unwise. Lord Tyrell has departed with his army, intent on facing Lord Florent in the field. Lord Tarley is in fact readying to face the Stannis forces in the east, Ricard recalled as he met the lady's gaze. They whisper that Old Town has not called their armies, and the Redwines have stayed on the sea, fearing the royal fleet will come to burn the arbor. Olenna continued to slowly eat her cracker. Ricard felt compelled to continue, like he was back sitting in front of his matron reciting the steps for herd care. The keeps along the Mandea are calling to be reinforced. Bitterbridge and Longtable are under siege, and House Rowan is still trying to put down the uprisings in the North March. Sir Loras bemoaned his brother Garland's absence. I presume he's gone to speak with Lord Hightower and convince him to march out. Is there anything I'm missing? Olenna reached out and poured them both a generous cup of arbor red. Much, Olenna remarked, and yet not much more than I would have first guessed. You learned the trade of tongues from someone very clever. Ricard smiled at the praise. My aunts are to be credited for that. A second son must find his talents or else be left with nothing. Olenna actually laughed at that. Wise women. Ricard let a few more pleasant minutes pass in silence. Is there anything else I can do for you, Lady Olenna? The Lady of Thorns hummed, come walk with me. More guards followed them down through the beautifully decorated halls and stairs. Highgarden had an openness to it that continued to surprise Ricard. Beyond the fact he'd never seen so many blooming flowers or verdant plants in his life, the whole castle was peppered by large windows and open courtyards. He rather liked it. The 3 rings of walls were impressive and the stonework well cared for. All in all, he found it reminded him strangely of Winterfell. There was a history to the architecture. Like a living monument who had continually been given new layers and levels, but at the very bones remained something indescribably old. Olenna carefully led him down through the inner castle ring, filled to bursting with people and supplies. Even with Lord Tyrell gone, and many soldiers with him, there remained more people in this one castle than Barrowtown and its sundries. He only got a few glimpses at the extensive stables, a place where he'd stolen many hours since his release. "You'll have plenty of time for horseflesh another day, young man. Willers is eager to get his hands on you," Olenna tells him. Roderick kept his surprise hidden. He has been carefully kept away from the main Tyrell family ever since his arrival. First by virtue of his confinement to a set of rooms in the outer keep, and once he was moved to Highgarden proper, by his strict schedule and supervised movements. That had changed when Lady Olenna had sought him out after the crowning of King Stannis. She'd spent a few days leading him through loops of conversation for insights into the northern host that now composed the third backbone of the king's supporters. He was evidently the only northern noble taken prisoner during the siege, though he had seen a pair of Vale knights and soldiers taken farther south. It had surprised him when she'd called him back the week after, and now his schedule included spending most of his time with her various attendants and favoured family members. Lord Willer's reputation precedes him, Ricard complimented. A true compliment. His brother Roger had been following the Tyrell heir's burgeoning breeding career for many years. Ever since he had taken charge, the specimens from the Tyrell stables had quickly become famous among the horse masters of West Eos. Olenna simply muttered something about men and mares before carrying on. She did take a moment to requisition a small cart that her two towering guards carefully pulled behind them. Down they went, into the dense bushes and orchards that ran along the northeastern wall. First on a well-used cobblestone road and then a quick left down a winding hard path, only barely wide enough for the cart. Embedded in the path were broken stones that had once formed familiar huge blocks. "Baraveg," Ricard muttered, kneeling down to grab a chunk of stone in his palm. Olenna called for the cart to halt and looked back. "What did you just say?" Ricard looked up, nervously juggling information in his head. "Baraveg, my lady," he finally answered. "A carry road." He motioned to the stones under his feet. "And what precisely is a carry road?" Olenna wondered. Ricard stood up and walked beside her, an old style of path, crisscrossing the countryside. Old ways of travel that the farmers and woodsmen use. "And you think we have some of these in Highgarden?" Olenna said skeptically. He showed the small stone in his hand to her, then turned it over to reveal a marking packed in with dirt and dust. "The 8th rune, this is an oath road too. Tell me, is there a godswood at the end of this?" Olenna's eyes snapped up to his, and he smiled, proud to be right. She motioned for her guards to get moving. Maybe he should add mystical to his barbarian routine. They traveled at a slow pace, passing remnants of ancient stacks of stone that once fenced in the fields and gardens. A strange hillock, out of place in the sloping terrain, revealed itself to be a collapsed tower. Ricard had spent his entire life on the grassy hills and fallows of the rills, and seen his fair share of ruins and repurposed stone. The path split off once again, and shifted from the broken stone to overgrown dirt. The trees, thick and heavy with fruits of all kinds, steadily led the way to a tiny clearing. "This is what I wanted to show you," Olenna informed him as she was helped down from the cart. Taking care with her cane and one hand on her guard's arm, she stepped over to the side of the clearing. Ricard dutifully followed. Olenna squinted out into the random bracken and trunks. "There," she muttered and pointed. Ricard leaned forward to match the woman's eye level. At first all he saw was branches and leaves. His eyes focused back and forth trying to reveal the mystery of this trip. It was a shift of the light, a sudden snap that aligned everything. He stepped over a prickly bush and stubbornly pushed into the foliage. He ignored Olenna's call, reaching out with his hand until it reached the tree he was searching for. It was not a tree though, it was a pillar, slightly taller than Ricard. From a distance, it appeared to have rough channels of bark circling from the base to the rough knot adorning the top. The channels were in fact long thick strings of runes, chiseled into the bare stone. "Lady Olenna, what is this?" Ricard calls back. "That's what you are here for," Olenna replied from right behind him. Ricard spun to her, eager for more details. Olenna locked eyes then examined the pillar. "It's a site of interest for my family. This part of the grounds was once the center of the Gardener King's ancient castle, before it was rebuilt further up, she explained. My late husband brought me here to spend the afternoons away from the prying eyes of chaperones. He simply thought it was left over from some demolished house, but I have always suspected more. She took careful steps around the pillar, tracing the lines with familiarity and nostalgia. I once asked a maester to examine it, and the young brat called it nothing but animal scrawling, she recounted. He was not a very bright man. Ricard shook his head as he carefully read the long lists. He had to stop and reread several sections. The writings were archaic in the typical fashion, but there were several runes and signifiers that were completely new to him. Olenna tapped a rhythm on her cane. She was not a woman who tolerated delays. Her patience was stretched when Ricard kneeled in the dirt by the pillar and began rummaging beneath the leaves and grass. Hurry up, boy, I didn't bring you out here to enjoy the writings of some ancient wildman, she snapped. Ricard's finger trailed one last time from the base up to the tip, coming to an abrupt stop on a specific string near the middle. This is a cenotaph, Lady Tyrell, Ricard informed her. Olenna frowned. We're nowhere near the Lycoyard. Ricard held up a finger, but we are in a godswood. Mind your cheek, I have no qualms sending you to the Shield Islands for the rest of your stay, Olenna threatened. The Andals burned the woods centuries before the Dragon Lords arrived. Ricard motioned her closer, her left and right stepped up to his back. This rune here, Ricard explained, finger resting on a single symbol, a circle with 5 lines stretching up above it. It is the mark of Garth Greenhand, his personal sigil. It rests next to the name of Garar, eldest daughter of King Garman, who is called here, the Magna of the Winding River. And why do I care about some dead girl? Olenna asked. The gardeners had dozens of children each. Lady Olenna, Ricard began, this is a grave marker for House Gardner. Including Princess Garar. Get to the point, his hostess retorted. Ricard smiled broadly, and he continued. Her husband Ricard moved his finger to the name connected to Garar, where a tiny symbol of a blooming flower was clearly carved, Olans Tyrell. Olenna began to chuckle, very clever, young Roswell. Ricard wiped the dirt from his hands, watching Olenna closely. You already knew what was written here, Ricard accused. The Lady of Thorns laid a hand on his arm, the first time she'd touched him since their acquaintance began. I am not always a patient woman, and there are many maesters who are capable of intelligence, Olenna said. They were never able to read the pillars, but they did identify the sigils. Ricard watched her carefully. There are more. Olenna looked him up and down, like a horse judged for its form and fitness. There is much history in the Reach, and unfortunately, not much of it falls in House Tyrell's favor. I believe you may be able to help me rectify that. Do I have much of a choice? Ricard asked, not completely opposed to the idea. Olenna smiled up at him. I think it's time you met my granddaughters, young Roswell. // Notes. /n, another chapter finished. This one had a very short outline and really grew in the writing. I had a small idea about showing a Northman in the heart of the Reach, and it spiraled into a little snippet I'm quite proud of. We've now faced a difficult situation. Can the North repel the Ironborn while Ned sees through his commitment to King Stannis? And what exactly will the Reach and Westerlands do to retaliate? C&C is always appreciated. Chapter 47, Songs of Defeat. Chapter text. When King Stannis finalized his plans for the next phase of the war, there had been many arguments on who would go where. Stannis, being who he was, placed his own strategy above the wishes of the various commanders and lords. The Stormlands and the Crownlands would commit themselves entirely to the fight in the Reach, where Lord Florent and others were in a precarious balance against their liege lord. The Riverlands had been eager to march at the forefront, happy to make war in another kingdom for once. Brynden kept a tight grip on his men, leveraging his reputation to send the majority with the king to the Reach, and personally acting as one of the king's chief commanders. This left the Westerlands to the north and the Vale. While Joffrey's claim was a direct threat to Stannis' legitimacy, he had already defeated the Boy King once before, and taken his capital. Everyone knew that the true challenger to Stannis was not Cersei Lannister's bastard son, it was Tywin Lannister. The old lion's legacy was on the line, and with young Tommen still missing and Myrcella in Dorne, Joffrey was his only hope at maintaining their royal status. He had to be forced into a corner, made to choose between his pride and survival. Ned's mandate was to prevent the Lannisters from sending troops into the Reach. After taking the Golden Tooth, their army had flowed down the river road, capturing small keeps and towns as they went. Their first real opposition arose as they bore down on Ashmark. House Hunter's scouts reported an army of Red Cloaks marching north through Sussfield. It was unfortunate timing. Their army had been stretched, creating a supply line back to the Golden Tooth while garrisoning the river road. Ned ordered Lord Redfort to rally the Vale cavalry to support the northern heavy infantry. Their battlefield was decided for them. The Red Cloaks threatened to cut their army off from the river road, and the only place they could intercept them was in the fields outside an abandoned tower south of Ashmark. He stood now, armored and agitated, looking over the ranks of his soldiers assembling. The heavy chain and spears next to the gleaming plate of Vale horsemen. The tower, called Sowsmoke, stood to their right, neatly placed upon a nest of hills still mostly intact with the old Bailey wall at its foot. "Have we taken the tower?" Ned asked the Valiman at his side. Lord Redfort shook his head. "No one has returned from this morning's sally. My son heard shouts around mid-morning." Harry on Carstark took a sip of his wine. "No doubt the Red Cloaks sent their own knife hands. Who do you think is in command?" The Lannister army was set on the opposite side of the clearing, bristling with pikes and archers. "With Kevan Lannister dead, I imagine some cousin has been called to lead. I saw the banners of Crickehall and Jast, so Tywin has sent loyal men at the very least," Lord Redfort responded. A cheer drew Ned's gaze back to Sowsmoke. In the distance, running above the Bailey Gate, the heraldry of Redfort was being raised. Ned turned back and smiled at Lord Redfort as he slapped his son Jasper on the back. Ned waved over one of his aides. "Tell Lady Mormont and Lord Sewin to begin advancing, and dispatch a messenger to Sir Egon. The cavalry must draw up and prepare to circle our flank now that the tower is secured," he ordered. Men, wagons and horses slowly tumbled into motion. The ranks descended the open field, anchoring their right flank to the tower wall, while the cavalry spread along the left. The Lannisters stirred from their position, eager to respond now that Ned had made the first move. As he watched, the flags unfurled, all dwarfed by the massive banner of a lion and stag halved, with a crown on both the stag's neck and the lion's outstretched paw. "Is that the boy's personal standard?" Harry on asked. Ned shook his head in disbelief. Was the boy king here? In the field? Tywin Lannister was smarter than that. Why would he risk his figurehead to an open battle? Ned doubted the loyalties of his bannermen were that fickle that a display like this was needed. "If it is Joffrey he'll regret showing his face," Redfort proclaimed. The march continued. The cavalry mustered, and as the first arrows were exchanged, Ned felt his heartbeat accelerate. He lowered his face, hiding his eyes as they clouded over. More was circling the edges of the battle line, keeping to the tall grass and fallen logs near Sowsmoke. Beneath the steady beat of soldiers' feet, he could hear horses neighing and rearing from the tower. He slinked closer and closer until he found a small crack in the wall. Bodies in red and white were strewn into piles at the base of the tower. Knights in crimson and gold sat upon steeds with lances and blades drawn. He had a split second to see the giant form at the head of their column before the gargantuan soldier raised his hand and gave a thundering shout as the horseman charged out. Ned's heart skipped hard enough that he stumbled back. Orin grunted as he caught him. "My lord?" Orin asked. Ned shoved himself up. "Alert the right column, they must stop." Lord Redfort's face screwed in confusion. "What are you talking about, Lord Stark?" "It's a damned ruse," Ned shouted. It was too late. Ned watched as nearly 100 men revealed themselves from the tower and cleaved into the completely unprepared northern footmen while archers laid shots from the tower windows. It threw his entire army off balance. The Lannister main cavalry suddenly pivoted and aimed straight for the Valiman, and the Red Cloak infantry picked up their pace. "Send our reserves in, push them to the tower, put the riders to flight," Ned commanded as his lieutenants scrambled to respond. The shock had already rippled across the front line. His men were unsure how to respond. The ones closest to the tower slowed, half of them turning to attack the ambushers. The Knights of the Vale had no choice but to intercept the Lannister charge, leaving the left flank to follow in their wake. As his reserves were mobilized, he knew they were at a disadvantage. Their men had fallen out of line, they curved up from the tower from right to left. Ned called for his horse. They would need to keep a careful hold of their formation to have any chance of coming out of this in one piece. Ned spent the next 3 hours riding from one end of the battle to the other. He saw the mountain and his men finally driven off, crushing men as they fled. The Knights of the Vale held their own and spectacularly defeated the Westerland Knights. That would be their only victory. His infantry had been too hard pressed, split between the ambush and the poor positioning. They had lost a third of their army before Ned was able to push the Lannisters back and give them room to retreat, protected by the threat of the Vale Knights. They moved camp back south to reconnect with the rest of their forces, led by the Great Jon and Lord Grafton. Their first defeat of the campaign hit his men hard, but thankfully it fueled anger and not discouragement. May Gregor Clegane rot in whatever hells will take him. Lady Mormont growled. Her arm was in a sling, her hair had been shorn to better treat the cut on her scalp. The Lady of Bear Island would have another scar to bring home. Lord Grafton calmly sat at Ned's table. We don't have a large enough army to siege Casterly Rock and meet Joffrey in the field now. Not without bringing reinforcements. Our ranks are still near full strength, but Lord Stark, you must send for reinforcements. We can't spare any soldiers, not while the Ironborn are on our shores. How can we guarantee they'll even cross the Blazewater without being attacked by Greyjoy ships? Great Jon argued. The king will not tolerate any delays. I doubt he will even tolerate this setback, Lord Redfort added. Orin entered the tent, temporarily interrupting their discussion to Bo. He made his way over to Ned and handed over a list of names. Lord Stark, we've finalized the list of missing as best we can. Ned nodded and scanned the list, cursing as he saw Cleesewin's name among many other, mostly northern, names: Fortarp, Flints, Locks and Liddles. Nearly 30 nobles and a good 200 common men had been taken. They had captured a scant dozen knights taken in the cavalry battle, with 2 Lannisters of Lannisport and Reynold Westerling, heir to the Crag, being the only ones of value. They'll likely be sent back to Ashmark by now, Ned said. Finally, having broken his silence, his allies and bannermen looked to him. What shall we do, my lord? Wait for reinforcements? Or strike for the castle? Lady Mormont asked. He laid a hand on Moore's dozing form. If Joffrey is here, then Tywin must believe it is worth the risk. We cannot leave him untouched. We will lay siege to Ashmark, Ned declared. Either they will sally out to meet us or flee back to the rock. Their plans were put on hold by the appearance of a messenger. A rider under a white flag in the colors of House Marbrand. I read to you now the words of King Joffrey Baratheon, the rider announced, a trickle of sweat dripping down his cheek. The rebels loyal to Stannis the Kinkiller, his breath hitched as he insulted the man who sat the Iron Throne, are invited to witness an exchange of prisoners 2 days from now, on Septi at the hour of the rooster. Each party shall bring 4 representatives as observers and guards. This offer is extended by the grace of his kingship and the blessings of the 7 who are one. The messenger clumsily passed the message down to the Marndale guardsman in front of him, before deeply bowing to Ned and galloping back out of the camp. Jasper Redfort frowned. He fancies himself Joffrey the Blessed. Pious king or not, if there was a chance Ned could get the measure of the boy and his commanders, he would take it. 2 days was enough time to shore up their supplies, see their wounded cared for, and put together a strong entourage to depart for the meeting. A tent had been constructed on a hill looking over the river running down from Ashmark in the distance for the meeting, gaudy and golden as all things the Lannisters made. A crowd of red cloaks stood an appropriate distance from the tent, mounted like Ned's own guards. Ned, Lord Redfort, Lord Grafton, and the Liddle approached. A small table sat under the awning, carved to appear like a tree, though Ned couldn't help but remember that the burning tree of Marbrand was likely a proclamation of their Andal heritage and the burning of the Weirwoods. 6 chairs were placed around it, 3 across from each other. Sitting front and center was the smug, pouty face of Joffrey, the king on the hill. He'd grown since the war started, only 5 and 10, and he was nearly as tall as a full-grown man. His crown emulated Robert's, a thick band notched with emeralds and gold, wrapping to a single peak with a diamond. He wore an ornate silk coat with a gilded breastplate bedecked in lions and rubies. His sword had been hung from the chair, it was crusted in gems. At his side was the grey-bearded Daemon Malbrand, Lord of Ashmark, and perhaps unsurprisingly, a Lannister sat to his left, some knight of close relation Ned guessed. He was half surprised that it wasn't the old lion himself in command. "Lord Stark," Joffrey called out, "come sit." Ned hung his own blade across the chair and took a seat. Words would do him little good here. He'd seen enough of Joffrey's conduct in the Red Keep, and he braced himself for whatever juvenile thoughts the boy had prepared. "King Joffrey," Ned greeted. Though Stannis insisted no one grant Joffrey his title, courtesy and custom demanded that Ned acknowledge the boy's crown. Grafton and Redfort sat as well. The little Torrhen, a gruff fatherly man who ruled his mountain clan with stern looks and silent frowns, took a position away from the table, lining up with a man bearing the scorpion of House Lork standing off to the side. "I'm glad to see you free of injury," Stark Joffrey cheerfully said. "We had quite a battle the other day, a shame it went so poorly for you," he taunted. "We both shed blood and lost men," King Joffrey, Ned countered. "Doubtless it will not be the last time." Joffrey chuckled, looking to the men at his side. "You want to clash with me again? You're that eager to taste defeat?" "I was surprised to see you on the field," Ned calmly added. Joffrey leaned forward, his cheer shifting to a twisted satisfaction. "I did what a king is meant to do, Stark. My grandfather would have me hide underneath Casterly Rock, like he did during my father's rebellion. Instead I took action. I went to face my enemy." Joffrey's tone climbed and climbed, his smile stretched as he bared his teeth. "They'll call this my summer hall, Stark. I should thank you, you're going to start my legend," he yelled, with his audience looking on in shock, disturbance and dismay. Ned felt ice enter his spine. He set his face in stone. One victory did not win Robert a crown. Joffrey threw himself back in his chair, sneering again. "I don't need to win a crown, I already have one," he pointed out. "I just need to kill that worthless uncle of mine, and take my throne back. Perhaps prune the kingdoms of unworthy lords at the same time, give myself a clean slate." Ned stopped himself from disparaging any claims that Joffrey had to House Baratheon. "Enough words," Ned said. "We're here for an exchange of prisoners. Submit your terms and who you wish to be released in return." Joffrey smiled again. Lord Marbrand was staring at the table and the Lannister knight had a haunted look in his eye. "Of course," Joffrey whispered. He stood up and sauntered out of the tent. He looked at the Lork guard and nodded. The man turned around and gave a sharp whistle. Ned noticed movement and stood. For a moment he feared that the mountain would ride up over the hillside. Instead he saw a small group of servants in plain clothes approach, escorting a horse and cart. "What are your terms?" Ned asked again. Joffrey looked back, smiling with glee and madness. The cart rolled to a stop and the servants hauled a large wooden disc out of it, as big as a hog. They carried it closer to the tent, a dozen feet away, and on Joffrey's command they tipped the disc down to rest upright. The disc surface was painted with a white 7-point star. At each point, a head had been nailed. One of them was Cleesa Wyn. Joffrey cackled. "Do you like my act of devotion, Stark? I've been reading up on the history of the faith, and not so long ago it was every good man's duty to kill heathens." Ned was shocked into silence. He looked at the so-called king before him, and for a brief second wondered if he'd be able to cut this mad child down before the Red Cloaks reached him. Joffrey sauntered forward and caressed the disc. "My septon says that a king must demonstrate his devotion to gain the gods' favor. Frankly, I doubt the Seven will show their favor to my uncle, now that he's sold his soul to some SOZ demon." He turned back to Ned. "But just to be sure, I think every 7 days I'll make another star, to please them. I won't run out of heathens anytime soon." Ned looked to Lord Marbrand and saw only shame on the man's face, and the Lannister knight looked sickened. He locked eyes with Joffrey and noticed the anticipation on his clean-shaven face. The boy was waiting for Ned to explode, to rage, to cry and to look away. This king on the hill knew no other way. This was the sum total of his soul. Cruelty, barbarity and desecration were his muses. Robert had his flesh and wine, and Joffrey had his pain and screams. "Winter is coming, Joffrey Hill," Ned said. "It will come for you soon enough." He turned on his heel, ignoring the screams of the brattling, and marched out of the tent. Once on his horse, Ned took one last look as the Red Cloaks closed ranks around their king and his shrieking voice. The Liddle came near. Ned could not recall the last conversation he'd had with Torrhen. Usually his sons spoke for him. "These Andals pick strange kings," Ian Furulf Torrhen commented. "Mad dragons, drunk stags, burning stags and now butcher lions. That they do, little Ned replied. The little nodded. I prefer ours, and rode ahead. They made good time back to their encampment. Summon Wispin and a senior shepherd to my tent, Ned ordered upon his return. He left his advisors to spread the word of Joffrey's words and actions. The news would spread through the camp by sundown. In short order, the Bolton man and a portly shepherd were escorted in front of him. Moore was pacing, feeding off of Ned's own anger and anxiety. I have a task for you, Wispin, and it must be kept quiet, Ned began to explain, and you are shepherd. My name is Gullen of Widow's Watch, the shepherd introduced himself. Gullen, Ned nodded. You and your comrades will be helping Wispin. Joffrey Hill has refused terms and killed hostages. Ashmark will be hard to conquer,